Back from the business trip, my wife had an affair with an old classmate behind my back. After returning from a business trip, I went to the hotel I had booked in advance to give my wife a surprise. As soon as I entered the room, I found it was in a mess. I immediately asked the hotel manager, "Is this how your 5-star hotel cleans?" After calming me down, the manager called the cleaning lady. But the cleaning lady was very aggrieved and said that the room must have been cleaned thoroughly before check-in. I was so angry that I cursed and said it was impossible. My wife was the only one staying there last night, and she loves cleanliness the most. The expressions of the manager and the cleaning lady suddenly changed. Wait, was it not just my wife who was there last night? Chapter 1, Infidelity. On the balcony railing of the hotel, I found a used condom. Furious, I immediately called the hotel manager and pointed at it, asking, "Is this how you run hygiene in a 5-star hotel?" The manager tried to calm me down and called housekeeping. However, the housekeeper seemed quite distressed, saying that the room had been thoroughly cleaned before we checked in and that such an obvious thing could not have been missed. "Maybe you and your wife used it." I was livid and cursed, "That's bullshit. My wife stayed here alone last night." The manager and housekeeper exchanged worried glances. Wait, could it be there was someone else with her last night? With just a week left before the National Day holiday, I was finishing my last business trip in Haicheng with my team. But my wife, Zhu Shuajie, couldn't wait to go home to visit her family. She said this year she wanted to go home early and asked me to join her at my mother-in-law's place. However, she didn't plan to stay at her parents' house, saying she wanted to stay at a hotel to have more freedom. As a devoted husband, I naturally complied and asked my assistant to book her a room at a 5-star hotel known for its excellent hygiene and service. They even had a great craft brewery downstairs. It had been over half a month since I'd seen my wife, and I planned to surprise her by bringing wine and spending a cozy couple of days together after my trip. Once my business trip ended, I rushed to the hotel where I had booked the room for her. After verifying my identity at the front desk, I got the room key. The hotel was a resort-style building, not very tall, with all rooms having balconies. Every room's balcony had a double hot tub, and you could see the distant mountains from it, which was the hotel's selling point. I dragged my luggage into the room. Zhu Shuajie had already left early, and the room had been cleaned. I couldn't wait to step onto the balcony, and as expected, the view was just as the brochure had promised. It had rained the day before, but now it was clear, and the scenery was beautiful. I couldn't help but imagine spending time with my wife, soaking in the tub and watching the red leaves in the distance. The outdoor scene was vibrant, and the thought of the two of us enjoying such an intimate moment made my heart race. But just as I was fantasizing, something white caught my eye on the small platform outside, next to the air conditioning unit. As a man, I was familiar with the sight. I moved closer, and sure enough, it was a used condom. I felt a surge of disgust. How could the guests at this hotel be so rude? After looking around, I realized the only possible place to throw it was from our room. I was furious. How could a so-called 5-star hotel let something like this happen? I immediately called the front desk to complain about their poor hygiene. My tone must have been harsh, because before long, the hotel's room manager came with housekeeping to my door. They both surveyed the situation and politely asked what the problem was. I pointed straight at the balcony. "Look at that." The manager's face immediately changed color, and she quickly apologized, instructing the housekeeper to dispose of it. The housekeeper apologized repeatedly, explaining that she had just cleaned the room that morning but hadn't noticed it because it was still raining earlier. Morning. I wasn't happy with that response. "What do you mean? Are you saying I threw it there? I just got here, and my wife checked in yesterday afternoon, and it wasn't raining then. Didn't you check the room before it was assigned?" The housekeeper turned red, likely worried about being reprimanded, and quickly defended herself, saying the room had been thoroughly checked when it was vacant, and there was nothing there. I became even angrier. Nothing was there? My wife stayed alone last night. What are you implying? I then demanded to speak to the hotel manager. At first, the room manager continued to defend the housekeeper, but when she saw I was getting worked up and threatening to escalate the matter, she quickly tried to calm me down. She apologized again and said it was likely a mistake, promising to educate the staff seriously. She even offered me 2 buffet vouchers as compensation. After a few more words, my anger subsided. It wasn't worth making a big deal out of something so small, so I accepted the vouchers and let them leave. However, the housekeeper didn't seem very happy and muttered something as they left. I overheard her defending herself quietly. Last night, there was definitely a man who came by. The room manager quickly hushed her, warning her that mentioning this would only cause more trouble. I stood there, processing what I had just heard. Could it be? Could my wife have been with someone else? I had never considered this possibility before. Could I have been cheated on? The housekeeper's words echoed in my mind, and I couldn't help but imagine all sorts of scenarios. Ju Shuajia's sudden early return was already surprising to me, and now she wanted to stay at a hotel instead of her parents' house. Could she have a new lover back home? Should I investigate further? Just as I was wavering, Ju Shuajia returned. She was dressed in new clothes, looking radiant, and seemed to be in a great mood. I couldn't shake the feeling that I saw the same sweet look on her face as when we first started dating before marriage. I teasingly asked, "In such a good mood, did you come back to see your old lover?" Her face briefly showed surprise, but she quickly laughed, dismissing it. "Stop joking, I was just out shopping with some old classmates." I paused for a moment, not only noticing her expression but also realizing that she rarely explained things when I joked around like this. They say everyone turns into a detective when catching someone in the act. I continued to probe her. "Come on, tell me, was anyone else in our room last night?" Her expression shifted even more visibly, and she seemed somewhat annoyed. "What's wrong with you today? Why are you being so suspicious?" I quickly backed off and laughed. "Just kidding, I couldn't find my slippers when I entered." She seemed to relax a little, but there was still a hint of annoyance in her tone. "I went to a class reunion last night. I was supposed to bring you, but you couldn't make it. And after having a few too many drinks, an old classmate gave me a ride back. You should thank him, or it would be been hard to get a cab so late." I stayed silent, reflecting on how much of her explanation seemed true. "Honey, you're not jealous, are you?" Suddenly, Ju Shuajia placed her hands on my shoulders and leaned in close, whispering in my ear, "It was a woman." I instinctively hugged her and kissed her on the cheek, but deep down, I felt uneasy. Something wasn't right. This wasn't like her. She rarely explained things and never acted this sweet. It felt like a guilty attempt at reassurance. The most important part was that she really had someone else there, which made the housekeeper's words seem half true. Now, I had no reason not to investigate further. While Ju Shuajia was out again in the afternoon, I went to the hotel's security office. After showing them my room card, I told the security guard that my wife might have forgotten something from last night and asked if I could review the footage from the entrance. At first, the guard refused, citing privacy concerns, but after I slipped him a 200 yuan bill, he agreed. Money really does talk. He even checked the entry log and showed me the footage, asking me not to take pictures or share it. On the screen, I clearly saw Ju Shuajia walking down the hall with a man around 10 p.m. They barely walked a few steps before passionately kissing in the hallway. The man's hands wandered over her body, and just before reaching a more intimate area, Ju Shuajia pulled him toward the door, and they quickly entered the room. The security guard gave me a sly smile as I held back my fury, staring at the man on the screen. He was a little taller than me, slim, and though only his side profile was visible, his delicate features stood out. The guard seemed to notice my reaction and looked at me with suspicion. To avoid embarrassment, I stopped the investigation there, made up an excuse, and left. Once outside, I smoked several cigarettes to calm myself down. Even though I had prepared myself for this moment, seeing it with my own eyes still made me tremble. The answer was clear. The housekeeper was telling the truth. At that hour, with them being so intimate, it was obvious what had happened next. My heart burned with anger. Ju Shuajia had been married to me for 2 years. I worked tirelessly to provide for her, giving her everything she wanted. And now, she had done this to me. I took out my phone, ready to call her out and confront her. But just as I was about to make the call, I hesitated. What next? What if she denies everything? Am I supposed to force a divorce? I knew a little about the law, and this footage wouldn't count as direct evidence. Ju Shuajia's personality made it clear she wouldn't back down easily. But why should I give her half of everything, letting her and her lover benefit from it? Hell no. I couldn't act so rashly. I couldn't let her get away with it. After some careful thought, I realized Zhu Shuajia's story about the class reunion was probably true, which meant the man was likely one of her old classmates. I decided to contact a friend who had once mentioned that his wife was a schoolmate of Zhu Shuajia's. I'd ask her about it first. Chapter 2, Determination. The phone connected, and a clear voice rang out, "Hello. Chen Sheng, what made you think of calling me?" This person was Shen Chuanjiu, who, along with Zhu Shuajie, was once known as the double flower of our school. Zhu Shuajie had the pure, gentle beauty, while Shen Chuanjiu was as striking and captivating as her name suggested. I wanted to ask you about something. What's the matter? Is it urgent? I paused for a moment. Her tone was quick, clearly busy, so I replied, "It's nothing. You go ahead with your things, we'll talk more over dinner tonight." Shen Chuanjiu sounded delighted. "You're here? Great, I'll make some arrangements, and we'll contact each other tonight." "We'll contact tonight." After hanging up, Zhu Shuajie's call immediately came through. "Honey, where are you?" My tone was cold. "I'm downstairs, just buying some cigarettes. What's up?" "There's another class reunion tonight." Another reunion, just 2 days after the last one. Clearly, she wanted to meet up with her so-called old classmates again. Zhu Shuajie deliberately dragged out her words, and under normal circumstances, I would have quickly picked up on her hint and let her go, understanding as I always did. But this time, I stayed silent, my face stern. Zhu Shuajie seemed to sense something was off, and quickly changed her approach. "I was thinking we could go together, so my old classmates can meet you." "Honey, would that be okay?" I sneered inwardly. This was a classic retreat for advancement tactic. By phrasing it this way, she knew that not only would I refuse, but I'd also be more likely to let her go. She knew I hated these emotional reunions and preferred business dinners that involved alcohol and cigars. I smiled faintly. "Sure, when is it?" There was a noticeable pause on the other end. Zhu Shuajie was silent for a while. After a while, I heard her awkward laugh. "Honey, if you're really busy, it's okay. Maybe you should rest up and wait for me to come home, and we can focus on us." She dragged out the final word, shifting her tone to one that seemed to imply something suggestive, making my thoughts run wild. In the past, I would have indulged her completely at this point. I coldly retorted, "You're really busy, aren't you?" "What do you mean?" Her voice faltered, clearly anxious. As expected, people who cheat are always the most sensitive. "I'm saying, you're going to meet up with your classmates again. Won't you be too exhausted to focus on us when you get home? I'm worried about you." I fought back the disgust as I finished speaking, hearing her let out a quiet sigh of relief on the other end. She must be relieved that I hadn't caught onto her lies. "It's fine, honey, I'm not busy." I interrupted her. "No problem, I'm not busy either. I can come with you." There was a barely audible gasp on the other end, as if she was furious. Feigning concern, I asked, "What's wrong, dear?" Nothing at all. "You should come back now, get ready, and we'll head out." After hanging up, I couldn't help but laugh at how she was trying to mask her anger. I used to be so stupid, treating a woman who couldn't be kept as a treasure, only to end up in this mess. With that thought, I headed to the hotel. As I reached our building, I suddenly felt the urge to pee, so I headed toward the restroom. But when I stepped inside, I heard a woman's voice. It was Zhu Shuajie's voice. "Brother Wang, I can't help it," he insisted on going. "Why didn't you just refuse?" "But I think he's starting to suspect I don't dare to act too harshly. He supports my whole family, and my brother and sister-in-law work for his company. Who cares? He's just got a bit of money. Come here, let me handle it." I heard heavy breathing, and the sound of someone deliberately trying to quiet their breaths, which sent a shiver down my spine. The man, money, we split because of money. Zhu Shuajie complained seductively, "It's because you didn't want to support my whole family. Now that Chen Xing is doing it, you come back for me." The man lowered his voice, sneering, "Yeah, what a fool. Why don't you get him to buy an accident insurance policy, and we can quietly take care of him? His company, his money, it'll all be ours." I couldn't help but tremble. Zhu Shuajie gasped, "No." I felt a slight sense of relief after 2 years together. Though Zhu Shuajie wasn't faithful, I didn't think she'd want me dead. But then, I heard her voice again, no, the insurance can't be bought. If he dies, I'll be the prime suspect. You can't come back to me for a while. At that moment, it felt like my world came crashing down. The man spat, little slut, you're not as dumb as you look. Of course not, Tilda. Then, something truly strange happened. 2 years. 2 years of hard work. All this time she and her family had been living off me, and now she wanted me dead. To take everything from me with her old lover. I clenched my fists under the rhythmic, indecent sounds. You eat my food, live in my house, and I'll make sure you pay it all back. I quickly opened my phone, recording their disgusting words, then stomped my foot and pretended to have just entered, turning on the tap as if I was washing my hands. Their voices stopped immediately, and the room fell silent. I smirked and immediately dialed Jushua's number. There was a sound from another stall, followed by the ringtone. Huh? Isn't he this Jushua's ringtone? I deliberately said, laughing as I walked closer. Before I could reach the door, it suddenly swung open. The man from the security footage walked out, directly approaching me with my vibrating phone in hand. He blocked my view and said, I found this phone, is it your friend S? Without waiting for me to respond, he quickly shoved the phone into my hand, almost as if afraid I'd catch on. He hurriedly added, here, thought you could get away with it. Oh. I grinned, accepting the phone, all right, you can go now, I need to use the restroom. He immediately blocked my way, his face turning pale. You. What's wrong? I can't go to the restroom. I glanced at him sideways, noticing his hands shaking. Just go somewhere else. I frowned, is the restroom your property? If you don't let go, I'll call the police. His face shifted through various emotions. I shoved his hand away and walked step by step to the door of the stall. The green barcode indicating the restroom being vacant seemed particularly bright now. The door handle stood silently, as if waiting for me to open it. What kind of expression would the people inside have? I chuckled inwardly, then stopped, turning back toward the exit. Forget it, my phone's dropped. I'll go back to check on Jushuajia. As I walked into another elevator, I smiled and pressed the button for my floor. Well, Jushuajia, let us see if you can make it back to your room before I do, without giving away your secrets. Chapter 3, Setting Up the Trap. I was worried that if Jushuajia noticed the elevator moving too fast, she might give up, so I thoughtfully pressed a few extra floors to slow it down. I finally entered the room right behind her. When I walked in, Jushuajia was still damp, wrapped in a towel, with her clothes piled haphazardly by the hot tub. To avoid giving away the fact that she had been trying to hide any traces of sweat on her body, she had even gotten into the water. She was slightly out of breath and said, "Hubby, you're back so soon." The nearest convenience store was outside the resort, and she probably thought I wouldn't be back so quickly. She hadn't expected me to be watching the surveillance footage from the security office. I gave a cold smile and said, "Why are you out of breath after a bath?" Jushuajia forced a dry smile and replied, "You startled me when you came in so suddenly, it's not from being tired." I handed her the phone. "How did your phone fall?" "I thought something had happened, I rushed back to check on you and didn't even use the restroom." Jushuajia's face turned pale for a moment as she took the phone and said, "I lost it while walking downstairs. I was planning to get a new one with you later." I asked, "But didn't you just call me?" Jushuajia's face went white again. I continued slowly, "So, after you finished the call, you went downstairs to walk, right?" She quickly regained her composure and said, Yes, I finished the call and then went for a walk while waiting for you to come." She seemed to be in a bit of a panic. I was afraid that if I asked, "Why did you come back and take a bath?" she might reveal the truth. Playing with her like a cat playing with a mouse, I always catch her before releasing her, watching her scramble to escape, then capturing her again. I smiled slightly, "I'll go use the bathroom first." After closing the bathroom door, I looked at my reflection in the mirror and smiled. When I was coming up in the elevator, I had already implanted surveillance software into her phone. Chen Sheng, I'm just a rural guy who made his way up from nothing, but I do have some skills. I'm very good at electronic programming. My first bucket of gold and the initial capital for starting my company all came from this. Jushuajia's phone had no security measures, so it was easy for me to install the program in no time. Now, all the methods she and her so-called brother Wang used to try and harm me will be solid evidence for their future conviction. Ding dong. The phone vibrated, and I opened it to find a message from Zhu Xuejie to Wang. Wang Ji, he gave me the phone. Good, let us deal with this bastard Chen Sheng as soon as possible. What do you want to do? He's coming tonight, right? You let him come, and I've contacted a businessman from northern Myanmar. We'll drug him and send him to the car. But, will we get involved? What is there to be afraid of? People who go to Myanmar are often tricked out of greed. It's his own fault. Besides, the drug will knock him out, and when he wakes up, he'll be in Myanmar without any ID or passport, and he won't be able to escape. Fine, I'll think of something to say so that everyone will think he deserves it. It's a shame his company's stock will drop. But it's fine. A skinny camel is still bigger than a horse. This was my bedfellow for 2 years. I suppressed my anger and quickly took screenshots of the conversation. The bathroom door was suddenly knocked on. Are you done, hubby? Can I borrow the hairdryer? I opened the door to let her in. Zhu Xuejie walked in with her hands behind her back, tilting her head. Hubby, can you help me dry my hair? I forced down my disgust and said, I have to be serious when meeting your classmates. I'm going to fix myself up. Hurry up, it's not time for fun. Zhu Xuejie was stunned, seemingly not expecting me to refuse. At this point, Wang Ji sent another message. The bathroom still seems suspicious. Didn't he notice anything? No, Zhu Xuejie replied. He said he wants to be serious about meeting you. He didn't seem to notice anything. Har har, he's such a fool. We don't even need to invite anyone to dinner anymore. He definitely didn't notice anything. Still, let us invite them. Zhu Xuejie seemed a bit nervous. I said no, and I mean it. She really wasn't bold. In the past, I protected her, so of course, she'd be scared of situations like this. But Wang Ji wouldn't be kind to her. I continued taking screenshots. When we arrived at the restaurant, I looked up and saw the big sign for Bafang Huiyuan, a well-known local upscale restaurant. I knew they were probably hoping I would pick up the tab. Zhu Xuejie always spent my money extravagantly. I sent a location to Shenzhen. I'm done, come here. The waiter led us into an elegant private room where Wang Ji was already sitting. I took a good look at him. He looked like a kept man, his eyes were empty, and he didn't have any significant presence. He said, Xuejie, who is this? Hurry up and introduce him. Zhu Xuejie shuddered and said, This is my husband, Chen Sheng. Hubby, this is my old classmate, Wang Chao. I smiled. Wang Chao, nice to meet you. Where are the others? I could feel Zhu Xuejie shudder again. Wang Chao said, I don't know, I'll keep calling them. I watched him fumble with his phone, finally feigning surprise. Oh. One suddenly had something come up, and one's car broke down. They can't make it. I didn't reply. I looked at Zhu Xuejie, who was visibly nervous. I could almost picture how, if I weren't here, she would be fawning over Wang Chao, wrapping her arms around his neck and playfully saying, Wang Ji, you're being too obvious, too scary. Finally, Zhu Xuejie took a deep breath and met my gaze. Today's a gathering with a few old friends from back then. There were originally only 4 of us, but now only 2 can make it. I'm so glad you're willing to join me, or else it would be so boring. I smiled. The female friend I sent that day, is she one of the ones who couldn't make it? Zhu Xuejie quickly replied, yes, that's her. I laughed inwardly and pulled out a chair to sit down. Zhu Xuejie seemed to finally relax and sat down. At that moment, my phone vibrated. It was a message from Shenzhen. Just finished. I'm on my way. I turned on the recording on my other phone and placed it on the table while they started ordering. Then I went out and reserved a nearby private room with the waiter. I sent the number to Shenzhen and casually returned to my seat. Hubby, we're done ordering, check if there is anything else you want to add. They had already ordered, and I quickly glanced over at expensive dishes all around. No, nothing else. When the food arrived, Shenzhen also showed up. I let her order first. She said, I know you've been doing well these past 2 years, but of course, I'm treating you at this place. I wouldn't have been able to afford it without that bonus. I couldn't help but laugh. I'll treat. You go ahead and order. I barely touched my food, noticing Wang Chao glancing at my drink cup from time to time. I excused myself to go to the restroom, heading to the nearby private room. Chapter for the details. Shen Chuanjia was wearing a refined professional suit, with her hair neatly tied low. After a tiring day, her hair was a little loose, and a few strands of hair fell by her ears, adding a touch of gentleness to her. She was looking at the menu calmly and didn't notice me coming in. It's still as beautiful as before. Shen Chuanjia was stunned for a moment, then looked up and saw me. She smiled so brightly that the whole room was filled with light. You are still as handsome as you were back then. She handed me the menu. I really have to treat you, so don't order anything outrageous. I had no choice but to smile and say okay. Shen Chuanjiao and I met at work. The interviewer kept both of us. We were both interns who were unfamiliar with the place and were of similar age. We became friends after spending some time together. But later I went out to work on my own and have run a good company in the past few years. As I was looking at the menu, she asked, "What do you want to ask me?" I ordered the food and handed it to the waiter, and asked, "Are you from the same school as Zhu Xuejie?" She knows that I married Zhu Xuejie. At that time, many people knew about this. Shen Chuanjie nodded. Yes, what's wrong? Is there a person named Wang Chao in your school? I decided to find out more about Wang Chao, such as whether he was my old classmate. Shen Chuanjiao looked a little strange and didn't speak for a while. I took a deep breath and said, "It's okay. Just tell me. Tell me everything about the two of them." She also took a breath, and then spoke. When they were in love, it was very vigorous and exciting. I felt my forehead throbbing. Why didn't anyone tell me? You'll know once you listen to me, don't be in a hurry. Shen Chuanjia narrated the story. Back then, how did they get together? I didn't know because I wasn't their friend. I only found out after they made a big fuss. As for the big incident, it was because Wang Chao pulled up his pants and refused to recognize Zhu Xuejie. He slept with her and wanted to dump her. Zhu Xuejie threatened to jump off the building at school. This incident had a huge impact. The school had a good discussion with the two parents, took money from Wang Chao's family, curbed the spread of the news, and used a combination of rewards and punishments to prevent students from telling anyone. You and he don't have any mutual friends. We only met by chance, so of course no one told you. After we got to know each other well enough to talk about it, you've been living well. Why should I tell you about it and make you unhappy? After saying that, Shen Chuanjiao took a sip of water to moisten her throat and asked, "Why are you asking about this all of a sudden?" I was silent for a while, and finally said, "She cheated on me with Wang Chao and had sex with him twice behind my back." I paused. "Maybe more than twice." Shen Chuanjiao exclaimed, "I didn't expect that she would just cling to Wang Chao." She blamed herself a little. "Oh, I should have told you earlier. I thought it was over and she would live a good life with you. It's okay. You did the right thing. Even if you told me at that time, I would still be willing to accept her past and everything about her," I said in a deep voice. "Then what are you going to do? Are you going to confront her and make her leave with nothing?" Shen Chuanjiao asked. "I'm afraid that even if I reveal everything, she will still refuse to leave. After all, I don't have enough evidence, and I still need to support her family." Shen Chuanjiao frowned. "Their whole family depends on you for support. And she still does such a thing." I laughed sarcastically. "She did more than just this. She and Wang Chao also plan to take my life, inherit my property, and live a good life together." Shen Chuanjia's expression gradually became serious. "Mr. Chen, is this true? Really? They are next door now, planning to drug me and take me to northern Myanmar." She was silent for a long time, with sympathy and heartache in her eyes. She said, "In this case, this matter can be elevated to a criminal case, and you can send them to jail if you have evidence." I said, "I want to do more than just send them in. I want to bring them to ruin and make them hated by everyone." She said solemnly, "I support you. If you need any help, just tell me." My heart warmed. Yes, when the two newcomers worked in such a company, why didn't they help each other to get through? This is our tacit understanding. If there is anything, just tell us. In fact, after I started working on my own, I kept in touch with Shen Chuanjiao, and we had meals together from time to time. But after being together with Zhu Xuejie, she used both soft and hard methods to strictly forbid me from interacting with women, even though it was such a pure and sincere friendship. I originally thought that by giving her enough sense of security, I would also be able to gain her wholehearted love and loyalty. Now it seems that I was too stupid. I said, I want to know the details of Wang Chao's family. I only heard that his family is in the mining business and they are some kind of nouveau riche. Coincidentally, my company has a wide range of businesses, including mining. There is no threshold for this industry. The most important thing is to comply with the above regulations. This means that a lot of profits every year must be invested in the safety of miners and the safety system in the mine. As for Wang Chao's sample, he might not be willing to spend the money, so many things were not in compliance with the rules. Shen Chuanjie said, I don't know the details yet. I'll check and tell you the details. Good. I went back to the private room first, and the two of them were whispering something. Wang Chao's few words made her face blush and she laughed sweetly. Laughing so hard that the body shook. After seeing me, Zhu Xuejie's body stiffened slightly. I pretended not to notice. What are you guys talking about? You look so happy. Interesting things that happened back then. Wang Chao replied. Funny things on the Simmons mattress. I laughed in my heart. I sat down, and Wang Chao pointed at the wine next to my meal and said, I just went to get a bottle of wine from the waiter. I always feel that it's boring to eat without drinking. Let me try it, Mr. Chen, this wine is expensive. I sneered in my heart. Said, it's not enough to just drink, there are a lot of delicious dishes here, why not order 2 plates of peanuts to go with the wine? Wang Chao's eyes lit up. I said, Zhu Xuejie, go get the butterfly flowers. In the past, I would never order her around like this. Many of my business partners treat their wives as faces, wanting them to be presentable and to have good social connections, but I have always taken good care of them, just like raising flowers. If she wants to learn dancing, send her to learn. If she wants skin care, I'll give her a beauty treatment. I never want her to show up at the dinner table. But this is the result. After Zhu Xuejie went out, Wang Chao looked towards the door frequently, as if he also wanted to go out and spend some time with her. Sure enough, he stood up and said, I'm going to the bathroom. Good. I watched the door of the private room close, took out a pair of gloves and put them on, stood up and switched my wine glass with his, then found the sleeping pills in his glass. I immediately poured a glass for Zhu Xuejie and shook the pills into it. I don't know how much of this drug to put, so I just shook out a lot. When I was done, I took off my gloves. This is a high-end restaurant, and some of the dishes are even lit with candles to prevent them from getting cold. Chapter 5 Assistance. I took out the candle and melted the gloves. The thin plastic gloves melted into small black strips that looked like the black paste on the edge of the pot. No trace at all. After doing all this, I remembered what Wang Chao said about friends doing business in northern Myanmar, so I stood up and stood by the window to look. There are a lot of cars parked downstairs in the hotel now. First of all, the car he called must be downstairs. Because I was in a drugged state, they didn't dare take me too far for fear of being exposed. If they took me downstairs, it could be explained as me being drunk and being helped into the car, which was reasonable. Secondly, his car must not be a low rider. Because I was unconscious and unable to deal with the inspectors, unless I was bribed by this northern Myanmar businessman, he would definitely take me to drive on mountain roads and check more people, which would not require a low-floor vehicle. Finally, it should be a car with more than 7 seats. Because he definitely didn't come here just to pick me up. Wang Chao doesn't have the nerve to do that, and he's not playing house like a child. Besides, if one person drives, there must be 1 or 2 people in the car to help if anything happens. Because people who do this kind of business are most afraid of failure. Excluding many low-floor sports cars and high-floor luxury cars, according to my analysis, there are only 2 cars that meet the requirements. In one of the cars on the edge, there were vaguely 2 or 3 human figures inside. The figure swaying back and forth doesn't look like he's eating. I called the police directly. Hello, is this 110? I'm at Bafang Huiyuan, and someone wants to sell me to northern Myanmar. I didn't choose to touch Wang Chao's mobile phone because this would be the most troublesome thing to explain and prove to the police. And now I can explain. I heard their conversation. The 2 were not very efficient and only now returned to the private room. Zhu Xuejie's hair was slightly messy and her cheeks were flushed. So disgusting. Wang Chao had an ambiguous smile on his face, and there was always pride and pity in his eyes when he looked at me. Har har, it's not certain who will have mercy on whom. He raised his glass, Come on, drink, drink. I raised it and looked at Zhu Shuijie. I'll pour you a glass too. Come on, let's clink glasses. Zhu Shuijie was stunned for a moment and replied, okay. She took a sip and choked, her eyes becoming misty, like a deer in the mountains, so pitiful. Zhu Shuijie, how could you like someone like Wang Chao? Why would you want to sell me to northern Myanmar? If I hadn't discovered it, what would I have faced there? Endless beatings to force me to commit fraud, or to sell my organs, to feed me like a blood cow, to force me to transport drug money. So many anti-drug police officers sacrifice their lives heroically every year, and the country invests so much every year to combat fraud, but you are harming your compatriots and doing these unscrupulous things. It's fine if you cheated on me, but you even do this kind of thing. After drinking a glass of wine, my body finally felt a little warm. The speed at which they blinked gradually slowed down, until they were so dazed that they could not open their eyes. At the same time, the cell phone rang. It was the police. I explained to the police, this Wang Chao and my wife had a feud when we were in school. I heard him telling those people that he wanted to sell us to northern Myanmar. Fortunately, I swapped the wine with his after hearing it, and quickly called the police for help. I want to send Wang Chao in first, because the matter with Zhu Shuijie is more complicated and her family still lives in my house. Wang Chao was taken away by the police, and I went to take a statement. I confused the audience about the alcohol Zhu Shuijie drank. I didn't make it clear whether it was Wang Chao who was drunk or I was drunk myself. My words made people subconsciously think that it was Wang Chao who did it. If Wang Chao woke up and said that I poured the wine, it could also explain that she was drunk. I guess by that time, the drug residues had been diluted to the point where they could not be detected. And if Wang Chao confessed that he was in partnership with Zhu Shuijie, then I was not aware of it, and I would be a poor man who was cuckolded. After verification, it was found that those businessmen in northern Myanmar all had criminal records and had all been arrested, awaiting further investigation. But the police have also investigated their past holidays with the woman, so even if they really become suspicious, I have ways to deal with it. After the police left, their hotel owner personally sent us to the door. I took a taxi and returned to their hotel with Zhu Shuijie. It was not until the next morning that she woke up. She looked at me, her eyes gradually changing from confusion to panic. I smiled and comforted him, don't be afraid. Wang Chao wanted to sell us to northern Myanmar, and he has been taken away by the police for investigation. She was stunned, and I guess she must be wondering whether Wang Chao was really going to sell her out. She said in a trembling voice, You pour me some wine. Wang Chao might have put the drug directly into the wine he brought. I pretended to blame myself. I'm sorry, I didn't protect you. If I hadn't poured you the wine, you wouldn't have drunk the drug. I was telling her, there was drugs in the wine, but he was unwilling to stop you. Zhu Shuijie's eyes were filled with tears, and she hooked her arms around me and hugged me. Hubby, I'm so scared. I pinched her soft arms and pulled her down, then stood up. It's okay now. Let's pack up and go home. The way I walked away so coldly left her a little dazed. She lowered her head and said, okay. Suddenly, she raised her head and said, Honey, I want to tell you something. What's the matter? I asked subconsciously. She sobbed, In my family, we have always favored boys over girls. I almost couldn't go to school. I earned my tuition by working part-time. I've never met a good person before. You're the first person who treats me like a treasure and takes care of me. I actually want to be honest with you. Hurry up and pack up, it's time to check out. We'll talk later when we have time. I didn't know what to feel, so I interrupted him quickly. The past emerges deep in my mind, frame by frame, scene by scene. My heart was filled with mixed feelings. But now I can't convince myself to forgive her, it's best to just not listen. Zhu Shuijie wiped away her tears and said with a smile, Okay. I hid in the bathroom, sat on the toilet, and listened to the noise of people packing up outside. I felt a little bit like escaping from it, and a little bit like I didn't want to face it. Otherwise, just kick her out of the house. Hire a better lawyer to prosecute the case. The evidence I have should be enough. At this time, my cell phone vibrated again. It was Zhu Shuijie who sent the message to Wang Chao. I don't know how you are doing now, whether you can see my message. Why did you drug me? Do you hate me so much? Every word she said was filled with sadness. Forget it, even if you are a stone, I will warm you up. If you go to jail, lose your job, and have a criminal record when you get out. What can you do? Mr. Chen gives me 100,000 yuan every month. I plan to ask him for a little more, 150,000 yuan every month. I will save 100,000 yuan for you to use. Brother Wang. I will wait for you. Chapter 6, Taking Back the House. I just felt cold all over. You are such a good person, Zhu Xuejie. You actually want to use my money to support others. Even though you were drugged by him by mistake, you still refuse to change your mind. I couldn't help but shiver. Zhu Xuejie, you are such an ungrateful person. At this time, she knocked on the door. Honey, are you okay? I've packed it. I suppressed my surging anger and said. I also want to tell you something. She asked in surprise, what's the matter? The company's capital chain is broken, there is a big hole that cannot be filled, I have to sell a few houses to fill the gap. So, ask your parents and all your aunts and uncles to move out. Zhu Xuejie was stunned and seemed unable to react. She said, if they move out, where will they go? I felt even colder in my heart, my company is going to go bankrupt. If I don't move out, how can I survive? Zhu Xuejie, don't you ever consider my situation? Zhu Xuejie was startled and said quickly, no, I'll call them later. Now, she couldn't even ask for a raise in pocket money. I slowed down my tone and said, also, we have to stop paying them. Let them find some odd jobs in the next few months. They will be fine after they get through it. Zhu Xuejie didn't dare to raise any further objections. After returning to City X, I received a document from Shen Chuanjie regarding the situation at Wang Chao's home. My father had just been released from prison for attempted rape. The quality of the mine at home was not high. Not only was the safety issue a face-saving project, but the miners were also exploited. When an accident occurred, no compensation was given. The compensation was delayed again and again, and people were starved to death. I called my secretary, Lian, and said, transfer all the company's misappropriated assets and invest them all into the mining industry, with a focus on the Wang family's mine. Next, we just have to wait for the east wind. Ang Li arranged everything and then came to tell me. Mr. Chen, my wife and I are going home, and I'm going to quit after I finish this with you. I was stunned and said, you have been my secretary for several years. Why do you suddenly want to resign and go home? I have saved some money over the years, and I have discussed with my wife about going back to build our hometown. I nodded and thought about how to hire the next secretary. He went on to say, I have sponsored a college student in recent years. I think she has good abilities, so I will introduce her to you. If you think she is suitable, you can hire her. Okay. This way I don't have to go to the secretary again. I can just use it and worry about it if it doesn't work. After finishing my work at the company, I discovered a lot of missed calls on my personal mobile phone. Without exception, the names of the callers all started with Zhu Xuejie, and the second half was filled with relatives. I sneered and ignored her. All the pressure was on Zhu Xuejie, so I let her explain and deal with it. But I didn't expect that when I came out of the company, I would be stopped by a man and a woman. They were wearing clothes from my company and their faces showed obvious anger. Mr. Chen, why didn't you deposit money into the card this month? And you even asked us to move out of the house. I looked at their faces and recalled carefully, then I remembered that they were Zhu Xuejie's younger brother and sister-in-law. At this time, the security guard had reacted and stopped them, but the two were still cursing. I straightened the folds of my sleeves and said, should I deposit money into my card? Should I let you live in my house? You've been sleeping with my sister for 2 years. Why shouldn't that be the case? Oh? Do you know Wang Chao? Let me ask you, how many years did he sleep with your sister? When he slept with your sister, did he give you money to spend and a house to live in? This young and inexperienced man was stunned and his expression became flustered. Obviously he also knew about Wang Chao and Zhu Xuejie. And now, you are wondering how I knew this. He reacted and roared in a timid manner. You have money anyway, so you have to pay me if you want to sleep with my sister. But now I don't have it anymore. All the company's divertible funds have been used to pay compensation. The next step is to lay off employees. They were both startled. The people in the company who came to watch the fun also had surprised faces. A junior employee whispered something and I heard it. It's terrible. Normally these two people do nothing in the company except to bully others. We let them lead the company every month. Now they want to lay off employees, and they will definitely lay off those of us who have no background. It's not hard to understand why employees would think this way. Because the environment is like this. If you don't do it, there are plenty of people who will. I continued, but this time, the layoffs are based on a comprehensive evaluation of everyone's performance and attendance. Only ability matters, not background. Many people stared at me in disbelief with their eyes wide open. Because of Jushuajia, I opened back doors for many people in the Jew family. Everyone has seen it, but now I say such things, which really surprises them. This time, I also want to use layoffs to clean up the Jew family and reform the comprehensive evaluation system here. The house was almost taken back, but Jushuajia's brother's family still refused to move out. When I arrived at this mid to high-end residential area, the family was having a happy meal. When they saw me, everyone's smiling faces froze and they all put on sour faces. Jushuajia's sister said, "How dare you come here? The company has become such a mess. We need to buy a house to make ends meet." Her brother said, "Yeah, they are still laying off employees. If you can't open a business, don't open it." The father-in-law tapped his chopsticks, everyone quieted down, and he spoke in a deep voice. "Mr. Chen, if you want to lay off employees, then lay off employees. Why do you want to lay off people from our Jew family?" I smiled and said, "I didn't mean to lay you off. It's because you didn't do your job. I don't have the spare money to pay you." At this time, I transferred all my spare money to their mining company. Now it has begun to take shape and just needs to gain fame. The father-in-law said angrily, "If you don't have money, can't you transfer the company's account? Don't bully me because I don't understand. You don't even need to sell their house." I stopped smiling and said, "Those are advance payments. If they are transferred, they will become loans. Do you know that if you can't make up for it like this, you will be heavily in debt and end up in jail?" The father-in-law said, "What's wrong with a little risk? We are a big family and we don't have enough to eat or drink. How can you support us if you don't take some risks? If you don't have the ability, don't marry Jushuajia and don't start a company." I was so angry that I laughed. What a precious treasure you thought these old shoes were. I used to be bothered by such comments, but now everything is different. I sneered, "If you have the ability, why don't you open your own business? Why do you have to rely on me?" I simply overturned the table, and the bowls and dishes fell to the ground and broke into pieces. They stood up yelling, a little burned, and frantically searched for paper while scolding me. I'll wait until they calm down a little and then tell them. Move out of this house within 1 day. As soon as I finished speaking, several big men rushed in and I smiled. Since you are weak and sick, I specially called a few people to help you. I turned and walked to the door and heard someone asking from inside. What to do? Now. Call Jushuajia. How dare this little bastard do this? Believe it or not, I will ask Jushuajia to divorce him. Chapter 7 Visitors. I'm so scared. I turned around and went back. The people inside were shocked as they didn't expect me to come back. I looked at the screen of Jushuajia's brother's phone that stopped at the phone book and said, hit me. It's just right for us to talk about it face to face." He really hit out with a fierce look on his face. The call was connected and Jushuajia's gentle voice came. "What's wrong? Tell her what happened." I said coldly. "Husband. Why are you two together? What happened?" Jushuajia's voice became faster and faster, and more anxious. Her brother said, "Mr. Chen came to force me to move out. He overturned the table and hired thugs." Her aunt said, "Hey, if you have anything to say, just talk it out. Why do you have to do this? You overturned the whole table of food." Her uncle even shouted, "I almost beat your brother to death." Jushuajia hurriedly shouted, "Mr. Chen, don't touch my brother." I sneered, "Didn't I tell everyone to move out a long time ago? Why are you still eating here today when I come to collect the house?" At a glance from me, the thugs pushed him to his knees on the ground, held his hands together, and let out a heart-wrenching scream. The others tried to step forward, but when the big thug stepped forward and Jushuajia's brother shouted, they dared not move anymore. I said to the phone, "Jushuajia, this is called moving." I looked at her uncle again and said, "Now let me tell you what it means to be beaten to death." Father Jew immediately slapped Jushuajia's uncle on the back of his head and said, "Speak up, do you really want to see Zhu Xingpeng beaten to death? Zhu Xuejie's uncle hurried forward, facing the looks of so many thugs, and said under great pressure, Mr. Chen, I was wrong. Please forgive me for Zhu Xuejie's sake. I turned around and asked, Xuejie, what do you think? Mr. Chen, husband, please don't touch my brother. Please. I touched my head and took a step back. This makes me look like a villain. In a society ruled by law, you guys should stop doing this and sit down and talk to each other. Now, no one spoke anymore. The entire large flat was as quiet as the stage for my one-man show. I said, Zhu Xuejie, what do you think we should do? Your brother doesn't want to move out and rent a house, and I can't get my house back. At this time, Zhu Xuejie's younger sister took out her cell phone with trembling hands and said, Mr. Chen, you've really gone too far. Breaking into a private house and hiring thugs, aren't you afraid that I'll call the police? I clearly heard someone in the large flat take a breath of cold air. I laughed and said, breaking into a private house? This is my house. Just report it if you want to. Legally, this house is under my name. You are illegally occupying it and you will be held civilly liable. Not only will you have to pay for my housing expenses for 2 years, but every one of you will have a criminal record, which will bring disaster to future generations. I don't know much about the law, but I'm sure they don't understand it even more. Besides, they were in the wrong in the first place. Sure enough, these words scared them. Zhu Xuejie said softly, leave this place so that my family can have a place to stay, okay? But I have no money to go around. Zhu Xuejie gritted her teeth and said, then, from now on, I only want 50,000 per month, is that okay? Before I could say anything, her family became anxious. You only gave our Xuejie 50,000 yuan? Aren't you afraid that people will laugh at you when you go out? I curled my lips and smiled. I forgot to mention that I can't even take out 50,000 yuan. Her family members were so anxious that they started cursing. I asked directly, Xuejie, I used to give you 100,000 a month, you should have some savings, use it first until I get through this period. The father-in-law said, you are a grown man. You want my daughter to suffer with you? I think if this marriage can't work, we should just get a divorce. I said coldly, I've encountered such a big problem, but you don't want to do me any good and only want my money. I think if this marriage can't work, we should just get a divorce. The whole room was silent. No one expected that I would file for divorce. They thought that holding Zhu Xuejie was like holding my lifeline, but she is no longer my weakness. Zhu Xuejie said quickly, how could that be? I miss you more than anyone else. I have to admit that the smartest person in their family is Zhu Xuejie. She has now realized that without me, they are nothing. I said, can you bear with it for a few months? Zhu Xuejie said hurriedly, okay, husband, don't tire yourself out. I looked at these people again. These people are registered employees of the moving company. Don't have any tricks. Move out within 1 day. I turned and left, and this time, I really left. Zhu Xuejie's voice came from the phone. I don't know what's wrong with him, why it's like this. In the past, he always wronged himself, and never wronged me. You still know that? The Zhu family said, you are so stupid. You can't even handle a man. How long has it been since you did that? Zhu Xuejie thought for a moment. We haven't had this since he went on a business trip last time. I sneered. After hanging up the phone, Shen Chuanjiao called. But it hung up after just a few rings. Is it a wrong number? I wasn't paying attention, my phone vibrated and a text message came in. Number for 32 Baihui Road, help me. She is in danger. I didn't bring a driver with me, so I quickly took a taxi and set the police phone number as the emergency number. This way, if anything happens, I can just press and hold the power button and dial out immediately. When I arrived at the place, I found out that it was a private customization company that caters to high-end customers and undertakes all kinds of banquets. The environment is very good and the food can be delivered to your door or you can eat in the store. I was actually relieved inside, thinking that I had encountered some kind of situation, but now it seems that it was the so-called drinking table culture on the internet. When I walked in, Shen Chuanjia was being coaxed into drinking another glass of wine. There were a bunch of big men with bulging bellies, and she was the only woman there. Naturally, everyone toasted her, under the pretext of toasting her for being a strong woman, but in reality, their thoughts were not simple at all. When they saw me coming, they all looked over. Sorry to bother you. Our CEO Shin has something else to do tonight. If she's this drunk, we won't be able to close the deal. I'll take her away first. As I said this, I helped her up. Those people felt a little unsatisfied, but they didn't know what to say. Who is she to you, kid? I smiled and said, Secretary Shin. The bosses looked at each other in bewilderment. I guess they were thinking, Shin Chuanjia hired a secretary as handsome as me. After coming out and getting on a taxi, Shin Chuanjia's drunken state disappeared and she was only slightly tipsy. She didn't have the strength to sit up straight, so she just leaned against me. Secretary Chen, tomorrow the whole city of S will know that I secretly hired a male secretary. The scent of her alcohol lingered around my nose, and I couldn't help but smell it. It had a sweet aroma. Then will Mr. Shin pay me a salary? She turned her head and came very close to me. What salary does Secretary Chen want? I laughed twice. Why didn't you come to X City to find me? She lowered her head, looking somewhat pitiful. I thought I would come to you after dinner, but I didn't expect. Chapter 8 Pull. She said bitterly, I didn't expect them to bully me, a woman. Maybe it was because she was drunk. Shin Chuanjiao looked a little cute despite her hatred. I said, who told you to do such a good business? They openly say you are as good as men, but secretly they are not convinced that you are a woman. What should we do? Secretary Chen, please quickly think of a solution for the boss. She looked at me and blinked. I also looked at her. Find a good man like me to complement each other. I saw her eyes flash and then look away. Only then did I realize that I flirted with her while she was drunk and confused. Wasn't that taking advantage of her misfortune? But it was obvious that she was the one who spoke first. Forget it. I won't bother with you. I am still sober even if you are not. She frowned and said, why am I not awake? Shin Chuanjiao tried to show off by stretching out her finger and almost put it on my face. This is 5, this is 6, this is 8. Okay. Mr. Chen, why don't you look at me? Shin Chuanjia's fingers increased from 8 to 5, and she put her 2 palms on both sides of my face and turned my head to face her. She wasn't that strong, and I couldn't tell if I was just letting myself go. She asked, why don't you look at me? It's up to you, then what? I whispered. And then? In this situation, usually then it's a kiss. She moved closer little by little. I pressed my fingers against her lips. Very soft and warm. I said, you're going to kill me when you wake up. Shin Chuanjiao couldn't open her lips, and said in a very cute and vague way, I will definitely be reluctant to let you go. I said, then you won't play with me. Our friendship will be overturned at any time. Let's fall in love. She kissed him, then let's fall in love. I actually let her do whatever she wants. Shin Chuanjiao licked my lips clumsily, like a kitten. Then he reached out and pressed the back of my head, tilted his head forward and kissed me, breaking through my defenses and taking over my mouth. Her tongue is also clumsy. Then a few murmurs escaped from the corners of his mouth. Mr. Chen, I have liked you before. She let go of my hand, looked at me and said, what woman wouldn't like someone who can help and warm her? The world is like an ocean, and you and I are like a lonely boat. I thought my life was nothing but a lie, but one day you approached me, picked up my oar and told me that rowing that way would be faster. But her tears slid down her face and fell into her mouth. They tasted salty, and I could feel it too. But which normal woman would allow herself to fall in love with a married man? I'm jealous of Zhu Xuejie, but I'm also glad that she's such a person, which gave me the opportunity to take advantage of her. She said, when I heard the news, I couldn't suppress my feelings any longer. After 2 years, we finally met again. What do you mean? I could tell she meant something else. Sure enough, Shin Chuanjia said, I resigned and just sent my resume to your company. I responded to her words word for word. You've reached that point and that position. Have you resigned? Shin Chuanjia blinked her eyes smartly. You had a bright future, but you resigned and worked on your own, fighting a desperate battle, didn't you? You have succeeded to become Mr. Chen now, and I also want to succeed to become Mrs. Chen in the future. She said solemnly, Mr. Chen, I'm going to start pursuing you. I suddenly realized that the group of guests that Shin Chuanjiao had tonight were all resources in her hands. Once she successfully joins the company, these resources will be fed back to our company. She treated me to this table of drinks. I frowned and said, Jushuajie and I can't leave each other for a while. It's unfair and disadvantageous for you to do this. It's okay. She smiled and waved at me. You handle your business, and I'll wait for you. You complete your career, and I'll help you. Thousands of lights flashed past the car window quickly, and her eyes were filled with colorful lights, as if they were filled with an entire brilliant galaxy. I thought my heart had died long ago at the holiday winery with Jushuajie, but just now, it clearly beat twice again. I don't know what to say. Shinchuanjie said with her last bit of strength. Mr. Chen, I'm so happy. I'm about to burst with joy. After saying that, he fell on me, in a daze. I reached out and held her lightly to prevent her from falling, and we were silent for a long time. I was asking the driver and myself at the same time. Master, how can there be such a stupid woman in the world? 2,000 on the vomit car. I didn't drink, and isn't it usually 200? What? If I vomit, I'll take it. 2,000. What? I was so scared that I shut up immediately. Shinchuanjie was still smiling. Finally I took Shinchuanjie back home. That's what I told myself. As a friend of many years and future partner, there is no reason for her to sleep in a hotel when she comes to my city X. Jushuajie was wearing some cool clothes. I don't know who gave her the idea, but as soon as I came back, she tiptoed and tried to hook her arms around my neck. I held out my hand to deflect him. We have guests, please stop making trouble. She was stunned for a moment, then hurried back to their house to change clothes. When she came out, I was helping Shinchuanjie to the guest room. Her hair was a little messy, her face was red, and her professional attire made her look like she was living a peaceful life. Jushuajie's face turned pale. Husband, this is friends. I answered briefly. She didn't recognize that this was Shinchuanjie from the same school. I couldn't help but wonder, when she found out that this person knew about her past with Wang Chao, how horrified would she be? I helped Shinchuanjie to the bed. She seemed to be somewhat sober again and looked at me cunningly. What's her expression? Are you pretending to be drunk? Did you lean on me on purpose just now? Shinchuanjie covered her head and said, I was indeed drunk, but not to that extent. I was indeed pretending. I want to rely on you, isn't it okay? I smiled and said, no. She snorted, turned over and ignored me. The room has a washroom. You can take care of it yourself. Go to bed early and try not to hang around in front of Jushuajie. She sat up quickly, supporting herself on the bed behind her and bending one leg. Why, I can't stand the light, or you're afraid I'll make her angry? I'm afraid she'll do something drastic and hurt you. Shinchuanjie was stunned. She lay down quickly like a cat whose arrogance had been extinguished. You, go away. Shinchuanjie is just like this. When she encounters something that hits her heart, she will act fiercely but weakly and run away. When I thought of this, I was stunned. It turns out that I know her so well. After closing the door for her, I came out and saw Jushuajie sitting on the sofa, looking uneasy. When she saw me, she stood up suddenly and asked, How come you brought your friend home? Did we not treat him well enough? It would be better to send him to a hotel. I said, my dear friend, my good brother, there is no such thing as poor hospitality. I am worried about her being drunk in the hotel. Oh yes, I didn't think it through. She lowered her head and kept tickling her nails with her hands in front of her chest. After that day I made a point of looking into psychology, and it was a sign of nervousness. It was Shinchuanjie who made her feel stressed. Chapter 9 Attack. I sneered in my heart, but still said. This is the friend I mentioned to you before. She isn't sober now either. I'll introduce her to you tomorrow morning. Jushuajie breathed a sigh of relief. Which friend did you mention before? I stared at her closely, not missing any of her expressions, and spoke softly. Your schoolmate, Shinchuanjie. I saw her pause and her face turned extremely pale. I asked, what's wrong? She suddenly raised her head to look at me, and when she saw my calm face, she said, no, nothing. She asked, didn't I tell you not to associate with this friend? I remembered that it wasn't that she didn't want me to associate with female friends, but that she didn't want to give me the chance to know the truth. Oh? Why? She was stunned for a moment, not expecting me to ask. He stammered, I just don't want you to associate with other girls. I raised my eyebrows and asked, have you been seeing other men? No. I asked, what about Wang Chao's old classmate? Zhu Xuejie showed fear and looked at me with trembling lips. I added, he is your old classmate, and Shen Chuanjiao is also my old friend. Zhu Xuejie seemed to have caught her breath and said, it's not early anymore, have you slept yet? I really don't feel comfortable sleeping in the same bed with her, and I have already slept in a separate room from her on the grounds of too much stress and insomnia. After the lights in both bedrooms were turned off, I suddenly felt like smoking. I opened the cigarette box and it was gone. I had no choice but to go downstairs to buy it. I live in an upscale neighborhood, so the security and lighting are pretty good. The only problem is that the convenience store in the area recently closed. Outside the community, there was a section of road under construction. There were no lights and it was pitch black. Outside, I looked through Zhu Xuejie's message records. She continued to send messages to Wang Chao, sometimes one message a day, sometimes 2 messages a day. There will be some transfers with the Zhu family. Most of the Zhu family members are lazy and take everything for granted. If they can't get money from me, they will ask Zhu Xuejie for money. Suddenly, Zhu Xuejie sent a message to her brother. I feel like Mr. Chen has changed. Does he not love me anymore, or does he know about Wang Chao and me? I feel like he has become cold towards me since that time. The younger brother replied immediately, hasn't he known about you and Wang Chao a long time ago? No, when? Are you still in contact with him? Zhu Xuejie said, he knew. He actually knew. Zhu Xingpeng's words made one feel anxious. What do you say? What do you say? What's so good about Wang Chao? He doesn't even give our family any money. Zhu Xuejie didn't reply. His brother said, wait a minute, I'll go ask Wang Chao for some money. He was arrested by the police. What? What's going on? Zhu Xuejie told her brother everything, and finally Zhu Xingpeng said, then tie up Mr. Chen now and don't let him run away. Zhu Xuejie said, I want to wait for Wang Chao to come out. He was sentenced to 3 years. Because I had never engaged in smuggling in northern Myanmar before, I just knew the businessman from northern Myanmar. It didn't cause me any substantial harm, so he was only sentenced to 3 years for intentional injury. A voice message of Zhu Xingpeng cursing came over. Zhu Xuejie said, because I have been pregnant with Wang Chao's child for a month. After a long while, Zhu Xingpeng spoke. I told them that from now on this child can only be Mr. Chen's. Mr. Chen knows about you and Wang Chao, and he no longer loves you. This child is your turning point. Our Zhu family's turning point. We can still rely on this child to support ourselves for a few more years before the truth is revealed. Zhu Xuejie said, but since I got pregnant, Mr. Chen and I have not done that again. Zhu Xingpeng started cursing again. Zhu Xuejie never replied to his message again. I suddenly felt a little nervous. She knew that I knew about Wang Chao's affairs, and the person most likely to tell me was Shen Chuanjiao. She might take revenge on Shen Chuanjiao. I turned around quickly and ran home. While recalling whether Shen Chuanjiao locked the door. Then I called the moving company and asked a few people to come. But before I could run through this dark road, a person flashed in front of me. No more, no less, just right in front of me. I stopped and pressed and held the power button to sound the alarm. I asked, what do you want to do? The man slowly approached, dressed in black and wearing a mask, but one could still see his slightly curly hair and sunken eye sockets. Not Chinese. I immediately thought of the revenge of the businessman from northern Myanmar. I shouted, this is the road section in front of Gate 3 of Lakeview Town. There are surveillance cameras everywhere. What are you doing? I made sure the police heard me. He said, what am I going to do? I'm going to make you pay the price. Who told you to call the police and have my eldest brother, second brother, and third brother arrested? His Chinese is not very good, and sounds a bit awkward, like the kind of voice that doesn't sound very smart. I raised my phone, I'm going to call the police to have you arrested as well. His eyes suddenly widened. Then I hung up the phone and said, are you scared? But I lied to you. I didn't call the police. He glared and said, I clearly saw you hit me. I said, I didn't get through. I hung up when I saw it was you. If I really called the police, I would tell you so that you would be restrained and not dare to attack me. Then why did you hang up? He was skeptical. Very good. This person I feel like is really not smart. You can fool people. I have to buy time until the police arrive. I can't confront him head on. Who knows if he has a knife in his pocket? I said, because I am in the same group with your eldest brother, second brother, and third brother. He was stunned and said, "You fart. Don't disbelieve me. Did they tell you what they came in for this time? Say we're going to do a business deal. Do you know what business it is?" Brother didn't tell me. I said, "That's right. They are afraid that you will come to trouble me like you are now, so they didn't tell you. I will tell you, they are not arrested, but they are going to the prison with my help and cover to obtain information from someone." I saw that he looked increasingly confused, so I struck while the iron was hot. Think carefully, have any of your people been arrested and imprisoned recently? It seems like there really is. The bet was right. I would say that in an organization like this, people must be arrested frequently, and this recently means the scope is quite large. Do you believe me now? His expression gradually became firmer. I believe it. Fourth brother. Fourth brother? Young man, your eldest brother, second brother, and third brother are all in prison, so it's a bit unlucky to call you fourth brother. He suddenly changed the subject, but what kind of information requires 3 people to go in together to get it? They all went in and kept it secret from me. Even if they got it, there would be no one to help them. Oh shit. At this moment my brain was working so fast that my CPU was about to overheat. I coughed twice and said, "Do you know that there is another Chinese national who also went in?" Chapter 10, Scheming Against Him. Who? Wang Chao, the only child of Wang Family Mineral Resources Company, Limited. The man thought carefully. It seems to be true. No, there is. I remember it was the business he discussed with my eldest brother. I held his shoulders, pointed a finger at the air in front of me, and spoke in a low voice with the momentum of pointing out the world and commanding the people. You don't know. The entire Wang family mining industry is your support. The man was stunned and wanted to nod, but he didn't dare to. I pressed the back of his head and nodded. Be bold. The entire Wang family is backing you up. He was silent for a long time, and finally nodded confidently. Okay. I know what to do next. Just then, the sirens sounded. His expression changed and he turned to glare at me. My expression also changed, and I took the initiative to ask, "You called the police? Do you want to harm me?" No. The man's eyes were filled with the eagerness to prove that he was misunderstood. It's not me. Fourth brother, how could I hurt you? I said with a righteous look on my face, I won't harm you. Let fourth brother hold them back, you can run. How can this be possible? Fourth brother. I wiped away his tears, wait until we come out together. I'm going to accompany my eldest brother, second brother, and third brother. After saying that, I pushed him away and ran towards the police. Finally I ran to the police car, and when I looked back, he didn't catch up with me. I was about to collapse. Survived the disaster. Still feeling scared. Mr. Policeman, this is what happened. I thought I could easily catch that stupid guy before, but I don't know how he escaped and disappeared without a trace. I concealed the frame up against the Wang family and told almost the truth. Mr. Chen, you have made 2 calm, smart and accurate reports, which have really contributed to the security of our country. I smiled and said, no, you are the pride and security of the motherland because you perform your duties conscientiously and conscientiously. I originally thought that after taking the statement I could go back and see what was going on, but unexpectedly they sent me another WeChat message. This Burmese man is called Myo Thinteng. Officer and will be tracking his next case. He may come to you later. If you have any clues, you can provide them directly to Officer N. She is not in the station today, so you can only add her on WeChat first. Judging from the WeChat profile picture, Officer N has neat short hair, heroic features, captivating eyes, and the teardrop mole at the corner of his eye, making him very unforgettable. A police officer joked, "You are really lucky. Usually, many of my colleagues want to add Officer N on WeChat but can't." I scratched my head and said, not cheap. I'm already married. Har, women nowadays are not as familial as they used to be. They can easily get divorced if you're not careful. The photo of your wife in your profile looks young and beautiful, so it's easier to get divorced. I laughed awkwardly and didn't say that I wanted to leave. Even if you get divorced, there is still someone waiting to marry you. Thinking of Shin Chuanjiao, I started to panic again and I had to go back to check on her. When I came out, I looked at my phone and it was 3 in the morning. I quickly called the thug, oh no, the guy from the moving company. Boss Chen, we have been waiting at the door for a long time. What's wrong with you? I said, something happened. Is there no movement in there? No, we were afraid of damaging your door, Boss Chen, so we used professional equipment to listen, and there was no sound at all. Good. I finally breathed a sigh of relief and asked in confusion, you have professional eavesdropping equipment? No, Boss Chen, I asked our guy to use a professional window breaking rope to hang down from the roof and lie on the window to listen. There shouldn't be any expectations. I gave them a big red envelope and then took a taxi back home. It's hard to get a taxi at night. I also forgot to buy cigarettes. Fortunately, the taxi driver was a heavy smoker and had a lot of cigarettes in his car, so I asked him for one. The smoke was very choking and had a strong smell. I took a puff and coughed twice. The driver laughed at me. I coughed out some tears. The driver's figure looked very blurry and the lights on the road covered him like a dim old cloth, or maybe covered my eyes. I said, what are you laughing at? You smoke so much, you must have bought several houses, right? Refresh yourself, no way. He stabbed my heart, what about you? You look so sad and don't come home in the middle of the night. Don't you have a wife or children? He really hit the nail on the head. I said, my wife doesn't love me. The child is over a month old, but it's not mine. Obviously, he was really hurt, but he didn't say anything. He threw a few packs of cigarettes to me and said, take it and smoke more. If we two brothers are full, the whole family will not be hungry. We don't have to worry about having no house. I smiled. The dim cloth is old, but it looks warm. At this time, my cell phone rang and it was Ju Shuejia who answered. Honey, where are you? I didn't see you when I woke up. Where did you go? Is something wrong? Come down and buy a pack of cigarettes. I've told you so many times, stop smoking and go home. I did a lot of wrong things in the past. I really want to have a good talk with you. Ju Shuejia's voice when she was asleep was hoarse and pleasant, and her worry and concern could not be concealed. I casually said, and hung up. When I looked up, I saw the driver looking at me silently through the front mirror. I smiled bitterly, she's pregnant with someone else's child. The driver's eyes softened again. It's okay. This kind of woman always speaks sweet words. I guess her concern and apologies are fake. I'd better leave her as soon as possible. At this time, my cell phone rang again, and the lazy and charming voice of Shin Chuanjiao came through. Mr. Chen, Secretary Chen, where have you been? Go downstairs and buy a pack of cigarettes, I said. Your wife was walking around, making so much noise that I couldn't sleep, and that's when I realized you were gone. I responded, were you woken up? No, that's not the point. The main point is that I said I wanted to pursue you, but you disappeared and she found out first. I am such a failure. I couldn't help but laugh, it's almost time to go to bed. No, Mr. Chen. I reflected on it and it must be because she slept with you, but I didn't. Let's go to bed when you come back. This way, I will be able to notice that you are not here the first time. Shin Chuanjiao smiled slyly, it's not exciting to be separated from your wife by a wall. It's so exciting that I don't dare to come back. No. When Shin Chuanjiao heard this, she started throwing a tantrum and rolling on the ground. I'm not going to sleep with you anymore. Come back to sleep. Your health is the most important thing. My heart warmed up, then go to sleep, I'm hanging up. After hanging up the phone, the driver stared at me again. She called you secretary, but she's your female boss. She's chasing you? She's even begging you to sleep with her. I scratched my head, if we can't get married, the future might change. I'm just talking about finishing her off. Still living in your house. Somehow, I always feel guilty about agreeing to it. He glanced at the destination of my order and said, Lakeview Town. Rented? The rent must be over 10,000 a month, right? I bought it. Sir, could you please pass me those boxes of cigarettes? I accidentally dropped them just now. Sir? We were just brothers. I said, that doesn't have to be the case. He sneered. You can't get used to smoking the $12 a yen. Chapter 11 Night Talk. I finally got home and Zhu Shuijie was sitting on the sofa waiting for me. She only turned on the floor standing chandelier next to the sofa, which emitted warm light. I was covered with a blanket, feeling drowsy. It seems that he hasn't slept since he learned from Zhu Xingpeng that I knew about what happened that year. I suddenly thought of my previous work. Although Zhu Shuijie and I have been married for 2 years, it was 5 years ago that I started to like her. At that time, I was starting a business. Zhu Shuijie and I lived in a small rental house. When I returned home exhausted, I would always see her gentle and distressed smile. She would hug me and say, "Don't drink so much. If you can't earn enough, just forget it. How can I marry you if I can't make money?" I heard myself say at the age of 25, 3 years after graduating from college. "Then don't marry me, I will just follow you like this." She touched my ear and said, "I don't care about status or anything like that. If my family urges you again, I will elope with you. Anyway, I like you and I am willing to go anywhere with you." I couldn't help but laugh. "You're willing to sleep under the overpass with me and eat white flour buns every day?" She pouted and glared at me with wide eyes. "Of course not." I laughed and said, "How dare you say that? I don't want you to sleep on the overpass. I'll earn money to take you to a big house, and eat steamed meat, marinated fish, dry pot shrimp, and braised chicken." She looked at me with her soft eyes, looking very serious. "Mr. Chen, don't be so tired and don't take on so many responsibilities. We are living together as a couple. I want you to live a glorious and beautiful life." Later I remember laughing at her. "Just you? What kind of money can you make?" As I waved away the memories, I sneered. It was so glorious and beautiful to wear such a big green hat. Zhu Shuijie may have noticed my long gaze and opened her eyes in a daze. When he saw me, he stood up and the thin blanket slipped onto the large carpet. Only then did I realize that she was wearing the first dress I gave her that year. I was not rich at that time, and the quality of the skirt was not very good, but it was not cheap for me back then. After her business started and things started to get better, all kinds of haute couture dresses filled her fitting room, and she hadn't worn any of them for many years. I was a little dazed for a moment, listening to her. "Mr. Chen, I'm sorry." I raised an eyebrow. "Sorry for what?" "I was unfaithful." I asked, "Infidelity of the heart or infidelity of the flesh?" I heard her say in a trembling voice, "I am unfaithful. Only infidelity. Only infidelity. You're still lying to me." She obviously still wants my money and my life. Zhu Shuijie collapsed on the ground. If she hadn't been close to the sofa, she would have collapsed. She knew I knew about their plan to kill me. She said, "Mr. Chen, you don't know that people who are forgotten by time cannot stand seeing each other again." I didn't expect that he would come to the class reunion. He was my first man. He briefly pulled me out of the Zhu family's quagmire and made me know what it feels like to be loved. I can't forget it. Mr. Chen, I can't forget it. I don't want your money, I just want to go along with him. Mr. Chen, I'm sorry. My body began to tremble violently, and then, little by little, calmed down. It's really strange. I was so angry 1 second, but the next second I felt like it was no big deal. To avoid being hurt, you have to admit that others don't actually love you. I asked, "In our 5 years together, have you ever loved me?" She looked at me. At this moment, there seemed to be something in her eyes that wanted to burst out like a flood. But the next second, this strange look disappeared in an instant, and he said to me, "I have never loved." "So, you said that all those things about eloping with me and going anywhere with me were false?" "Yes, I want to go with you to a place where no one can find us, but that doesn't mean I really love you." After she finished speaking, she grabbed my trouser leg and said, "Mr. Chen, I only ask you to let me go for the sake of our 5 years together." "Let you go? Where?" "Find a place to be a cheap laborer, and then wait for Wang Chao to be released from prison in 3 years." She smiled miserably. "Don't talk about the future, talk about now, Mr. Chen, divorce me." My mind suddenly went back to the time when I faced a major setback in my career and was almost at the end of my rope. She quietly replaced my wine with water, then sat next to me and coaxed me into taking the cigarette from my hand. She said, "Mr. Chen, what's wrong with you? Marry me." I asked her in a daze what to do about the Zhu family, and she said it was okay and we could get the marriage certificate quietly. I looked at her and smiled and said, "Divorce? How?" I'll leave the house with nothing and pay you 3 million. That's the end of our relationship. Do you have money? Can you afford 3 million? She smiled. It was a cold night, and she smiled as well. I'll slowly pay you back. I sneered, don't sell your body if you can't afford it. It will be embarrassing for me if someone recognizes me. Her face was pale, and she forced a smile with the corners of her mouth. No, don't worry. Why? Why is she wearing the clothes she wore back then but talking about divorce? Can Joshua survive without me? Why? Why not mention the children? Even if I knew the truth, that she lied to me and got pregnant with my child, there might still be room for maneuver. Now I understood that she just wanted to divorce me, not to retreat in order to advance, nor to fight for her own rights. It's really boring. I couldn't describe how I felt, so I pointed at the door. Then get out, now. She shuddered twice. Can we leave tomorrow? I have nowhere else to go, Mr. Chen. Go find your old lover. You'll be in jail for committing a crime. I yelled. After she yelled, the air was quiet for 2 seconds. I looked at her and her eyes were wide open, filled with sadness and sorrow. It's obviously you who are wrong, why are you still looking at me like that? I turned around and went back to my room and ignored her no more. Through the door, there were sounds coming from outside that were deliberately kept low, but each one seemed heavy. It was Joshua walking towards the door. I simply tidied myself up, closed my eyes and went to sleep, and slept until dawn. My secretary sent a message. Mr. Chen, the girl I recommended has come to X City and will be available for your inspection this morning. Will you come to the company this morning? Coming. After informing him, I got up, brushed my teeth and opened the door. Joshua is no longer here. I walked into the room she moved to later and found that almost all of her things were not taken away. All her clothes and brand name bags were still there. I feel calm inside. No matter how good or bad something happens to her, I won't have any reaction. At this moment, I thought of Jiao. Her room door was still closed tightly and she looked quiet. I thought something was wrong. Logically, she should have gotten enough sleep, so how come she didn't wake up when I did? I knocked on the door but she didn't respond, so I quickly found the spare key and opened her room door. She had a terrible sleeping posture, lying on the bed with her quilt covering her carelessly, but there was no sign of her revealing anything. I was just about to close the door and leave. Chapter 12 Secretary. Suddenly, I saw that the cell phone in her hand was still glowing. Pretending to sleep. So I turned around again, and suddenly became interested in seeing how long she could pretend. When I got closer, I was stunned. Her phone was stuck on the chat page with me, and on the keyboard was a line of unsent draft. What's wrong? Are you okay? It turns out that when Joshua and I had a showdown that night, she was not asleep either. So what happened next? What happened after I fell asleep? I have set my phone to sleep mode, so who knows how long she spent looking at the chat box and deleting and reducing messages last night. At this time, Jiao turned over in a daze. A few sweet moans came out of her mouth, like a kitten waking up. She seemed to be aware of my figure while half asleep and half awake. She squinted her eyes and saw that there was indeed a person there. Her body trembled and she turned pale with fear. Mr. Chen? Is that you? Ouch, I didn't react. I was scared to death. Are you coming to my company to start work today? Jiao held her chest for a long time before she said, okay. Do you want to go together? In the car, I touched the luxurious and restrained leather seat and couldn't help wanting to cry. A lot of things happened, and finally I got into my driver's car. In the car, Jiao suddenly approached. Mr. Chen, I have settled in X City now. Do you think I should rent a house? I thought about it and there was no reason to let Jiao live in my house forever. Okay, go find it, and I'll reimburse you for the rent. Unexpectedly, she wrinkled her nose and said bitterly, then I have to prepare. I will prepare a pair of men's slippers and put them at the door, prepare a suit and hang it on the balcony, sleep in fear every day, and put a hair in the door lock every day. It's okay, Mr. Chen. Even if it's dangerous for a girl to live alone, it's okay. She looked at me with her eyes blinking. Jiao always has the ability to make me laugh. I said, you can rent a house in Lakeview Town. She pursed her lips, it's so expensive. I don't want to waste your money. Anyway, Shin Chuan-jiao sat up again, her head tilted to one side, her fingers resting on her chin. She's moved out anyway, and your flat is so big that it's convenient for the two of us to commute to get off work together, so I'll just live in the guest room tilde. I said, I'm a grown man, it's not convenient. What's inconvenient? I took a deep breath and said, Shin Chuan-jiao, don't you know the difference between men and women? With our relationship, who cares about who? I said, aren't you afraid that I might have evil intentions towards you? The interior of the car was spacious and she and I sat face to face. She bit her lip when she heard me, crossed her legs and rubbed my feet. What should I do? I'm so scared. I grabbed her feet and used the remote control to raise the driver's front partition. She used my strength to put her dark red high heels on my chest and said, Mr. Chen, I have had evil intentions towards you for a long time. How early? I pinched her ankle, slowly moved to her calf, and asked, when you see my handsome face? She giggled. When you helped me pick up the scattered documents, when the boss took us out for a social event, when you secretly gave me hangover pills. Anyway, it was very early in the morning. I can't remember. I leaned forward, still holding her legs in my hands, and moved to her lips. Shin Chuan-jiao, do you know what you are doing? It was too close and too tight, maybe he touched her ticklish spot. Shin Chuan-jiao laughed so hard that her body shook, and said with her neck tilted back. I don't know. I'm so confused right now that I just want to kiss you. Of course you're stupid. You've worked in such a good company for 6 or 7 years and have achieved such a high position, but you suddenly quit and said you want to work with me. I brushed her soft lips, then let go of her and sat up straight. At this time, the car stopped. We have arrived at our destination. I said, but I know what I'm doing. Shin Chuan-jiao's cheeks were red, and she asked angrily, can't you just like me for a little while? I looked at her as if I saw Zhu Shuajie 5 years ago, and smiled, I'm a little scared. The driver came to open the door and I stepped out. Shin Chuan-jiao quickly fixed her shirt that I had wrinkled, straightened her tie, and pulled up her skirt before getting out of the car and jogging to catch up with me. I couldn't help but laugh. She glared at me coquettishly, what are you laughing at? You forgot to cut your hair. She was stunned, looking as cute as an angry kitten emoticon, and said while combing her hair. It's all your fault. You had to do this and that in the car, and I just tied my hair up. At that time, we had just entered the elevator and were in silence after the employees greeted each other. It seemed as if suddenly, it was even quieter. The rubbing sound of clothes disappeared, as did the tiny noises. Veins on my forehead were throbbing, and I could already imagine what my employees would say. Sure enough, later I heard him unable to hold back and say, who is this woman? Mr. Chen's lover. What lover? Maybe. Anyway, didn't you see that the boss lady's family members who were slacking off at work were all fired? This means that Mr. Chen may be divorced. Mr. Chen and this woman came in the same car. Maybe they are living together. You don't know, this woman is Shin Chuan-jiao, she is well known in the industry, extremely strong, it stands to reason that the boss can't poach her. Could it be that Mr. Chen seduced her? When I heard Mr. Chen is righteous and sells his body, the corners of my mouth twitched. I assigned Shin Chuan-jiao's job directly to the HR department and let her lead her own team. Shin Chuan-jiao had only been in the company for a while, but she already knew my current situation clearly. She said, can't make ends meet. And you're laying off employees? Based on the development of your company, this is impossible. I gave her a thumbs up and said, my Chuan-jiao is really smart, she knows everything. She gave me a charming look, but her face was a little red. I said, I plan to enter the mining industry. Wang Chao wants me to die, but after he comes out after 3 years, he can continue to live comfortably and well. I don't want that. Shin Chuan-jiao's expression also turned serious. I don't understand that, how can I help you? No, I have some plans. After saying that, my secretary who was about to resign came over and said, Mr. Chen, the girl is here. Is it convenient for you to see her now? I agreed, got up and left. Behind me, Shin Chuan-jiao stared at my secretary and asked, what girl? After that I walked away. When I arrived at the interview room, a young girl stood in the middle, looking a little restrained. She had her hair tied in a low ponytail, neither too loose nor too tight, and wore a pair of round glasses. Her face still had a little baby fat, her skin was fair and rosy, and she looked very cute and young. He won't push a minor to me, right? I asked, how old? When she heard my voice, she turned around and said, I'm 22 years old and I just graduated from college. Hello, Mr. Chen. My name is Bai Weiwei. I asked, do you have any work experience? This is not a place where you can just sit back and wait for experience. Even though you were recommended by someone you know, you still need to have solid skills yourself. Yes. She looked at me. Chapter 13 by Weiwei. When I was 8 years old, I was herding cattle in my hometown. Everyone knew that I was hardworking and able to endure hardships. Any cattle that passed through my hands would become fat and strong. I started school at the age of 13. I washed dishes for others while studying. However, the county had strict regulations and did not allow child labor. I only worked secretly for 2 months. My boss did not pay me. I decided to study law at that time. I also have all the necessary documents. If you hire me, you can save the money for legal counsel. Later, because of the salary issue, I really couldn't eat. I thought if I couldn't eat, he wouldn't be able to eat either, so I made a big fuss. I met your secretary, received financial support, stopped working, and went to college. I didn't have any work experience in college because I received scholarships and prize money from various competitions every year. She looked straight into my eyes, her ambition hidden behind her glasses. She said, I have great potential, Mr. Chen. If you are short of someone, why not hire me and give it a try? This ambition seems to be exactly the same as when I was looking for a job 8 years ago. I asked, where are your parents? She said, I don't have any parents. I was stunned. I never saw my parents since I was a child. My grandmother took care of me until I was 8 and then she died. I later ate at various homes, wherever I worked I ate. Mr. Chen may not know how orphans in the countryside grow up. I said, I know. I don't have parents either. Seeing her stunned, I added, I don't have a grandmother yet. I can't even eat at other people's houses, probably because my parents are unpopular. Everyone avoids me like the plague. I don't even know how I got through my childhood. It seems that I have memories and I am alone. It's really magical. I paused, I'm not saying this to resonate with you. I want to tell you that having a miserable life is useless in my company. You need to have strength. She seemed to be shocked, looked up at me and said, then try me. I also looked at her, 1 month probation period, 70% of the salary, do it. Dry. Report to the Human Resources Department, get your work clothes and come to work. Learn from my secretary first. I turned around to leave when she suddenly called me from behind, Mr. Chen. I stopped and waited for her to speak. Thank you. Thank me. You're trying to tell me that past setbacks won't stop success, right? I smiled and said, use your imagination. Coming out of the interview room, he responded to the old secretary's questions and glanced at Shen Chuanjiao from a distance. She quickly got down to work, moving with great determination and swiftness, just like Shen Chuanjiao when she said she wanted to pursue me. From being at a loss to being able to handle it with ease, she and I have walked this journey together. She is really like a cat. When she moves like thunder outside, she makes people terrified. She is called Sangbiao. Only sometimes, she would show her soft belly to people, stick close to people and act coquettishly, and then say, Mr. Chen, just call me Mimi. My heart trembled and I quickly dismissed this horrifying image. Just then, my cell phone vibrated. I looked at the sender and thought for 2 seconds before I realized that it was Officer N. She said succinctly, and Yushan, can we meet? I also put it briefly, it's inconvenient. It's not like I have nothing to do. After a while, a 2,000 yuan transfer came in, and she said, can you take a day off? He didn't even use his power to pressure people. I immediately responded, okay, where shall we meet? Send me the location and I'll pick you up. I sent my location and thought, how can a police officer be so rich? Could she be a corrupt official? I said, Bai Weiwei, find a way to let me know about this officer in Yushan within half an hour. Good. In the new era, we cannot just say that we are investigating something because it is against the law. At the same time, I am also curious about how far Bai Weiwei can go in obtaining information. It didn't take long for her to get the message. And Yushan, 26 years old, first-class police officer in X City, young and promising, selected as an outstanding role model in X City, graduated from XXX University in XXX, and won the title of XXX in XXX. I looked up, is it the news that was published? Bai Weiwei said, no, she is the daughter of An Qingqian, the owner of the largest business in City X. No wonder he is so rich. I asked, where did you get this information? I visited her school's official website and entered the school's gossip group through a classmate. I searched the chat records for content related to her and made inferences. I then verified it from An Qingqian company. What a simple and unpretentious way to get information. I nodded. Well done. Bai Weiwei pushed her glasses up. Actually, Mr. Chen, I used to be curious about how those overbearing CEOs checked people when I read novels. My secretary is busy. If you are free now, can you teach me? I waved my hand and said, many companies buy and collect user information from apps, such as insurance companies, to facilitate targeted resource allocation to attract customers. Others are simply very powerful and know almost everyone in the local area. It's not difficult to just make a phone call and ask something. Of course, the first rule of our company is to obey the law. Don't even think about that. Your idea is very smart. Bai Weiwei, hash. She nodded like a chick pecking at rice to show that she accepted the instruction. I found her to be a very cute girl, even a little silly. Only during the interview did she reveal her ambitious desire. At the same time, my cell phone rang. I picked up the phone and heard a cool and elegant voice, I'm in Yushan. I'm here. I walked downstairs to the company building and saw a convertible low-floor sports car parked under the office building, attracting a lot of attention. I drove up the driveway. Hello, Mr. Chen. And Yushan looks very similar to the photo. When I first saw the photo, I thought it was a little girl who loved beauty and photoshopped it to be pretty. It can be said that she is more beautiful in real life than in the photo. She has neat short hair, heroic features, and the teardrop mole under her eye only adds to her cold air. She turned to me and said, in an instant, very heroic, hello, do you work here? From what she said, it was obvious that she hadn't read my information. Yes, what matters to her is the person she is tracking, and I just play a supporting role. Yes, aren't we being too high profile? I pointed to her car. Seeing me getting on the bus, many employees who were out of the company looked at me sideways. No, she said in a cold voice. Then I stepped on the accelerator and felt a strong push on my back. I felt as if the wind had condensed into substance and squeezed me into the seat. Scary. This woman is so wild. I subconsciously grabbed it, but it was soft. Before I could react, I pinched it. When I looked down, I just felt extremely embarrassed. My wheat-colored hands were placed on Enyushan's white legs. I quickly let go. She glanced at me, and her eyes seemed to say, another stinky man. She said in a businesslike tone, Mr. Chen, keep your hands to yourself. As a citizen of the motherland, you have an obligation to assist the police instead of thinking about getting compensation from me. Chapter 14, The Master of Fudge is online again. I said, feeling both amused and angry. As a people's policeman, you are supposed to serve the people. I haven't even said anything yet, but you are so fierce. How can you be a people's policeman? She slammed on the brakes. A strong feeling of weightlessness came over me, and I felt as if I was about to fly out. My head suddenly tilted forward and almost hit the front. At this moment, I lost all my anchors except the safety belt. I felt like a duckweed floating in the wind, but was restrained by the surface tension of the water and could not swim into the sky. All I could hear was the whistling wind and the friction sound of the seat belt being pulled quickly. After a while, calm returned. I took 2 breaths and yelled. Crazy woman, you're going to shake me to death. Get off. I just said a few words to you, is it that serious? She also took 2 breaths and said, sorry, I mean, we're at the cafe, let's talk here, please get off the car. I unbuckled my seatbelt and muttered, what the hell? Wait. She said suddenly. I didn't understand what was going on, so I just watched her unbuckle her seatbelt, get out of the car, open the door and then close it again. The car door opened with a bang and she was already walking towards me. And Yushan helped me open the car door. She forced a stiff smile out of her stiff face, get out of the car. Unbelievable. This crazy woman, I thought she was too cold to laugh. I said, it's better not to laugh. It's uglier than crying. And Yushan was stunned, and I felt her whole body pause, as if she was about to scold me, but she held back and didn't say a word. What happened? Because I said, how can you be a policeman if you are so fierce? I looked at her and said tentatively, actually, you are 4 years younger than me. How do you know? Officer, and you can find out by just searching online. I don't know if it was an illusion, but she seemed to feel a little better after hearing what I said. She asked me, so what do you want to say? I said, well, how about you call me brother? The people's police should get along well with the masses. She suddenly turned and looked at me. The look was so sharp that I couldn't help but shrink my head. I quickly changed the subject and said, let's get down to business. What do you want to know from me today? She endured it for a while, and then said, brother, I want to know about Meow Dandang. I was stunned. This crazy woman actually screamed. People's police is her keyword. Yes, as the daughter of a big businessman, she became a police officer instead of inheriting the family business. She must be very passionate about it. From this we can see that she has always been well protected by her family. When I said that, she actually screamed, arguing for a meaningless title. At the age of 26, she was as innocent as an 18-year-old. She has a cold and ruthless face, but her heart is simple and naive. I suddenly thought of Bai Weiwei, who is at the age of clear stupidity and looks obedient and silly, but she has already been struggling in this society for many years. She is young and ambitious. The contrast between the two people was unexpected. And Yushan ordered 2 cups of coffee and some dessert, sat down with me near the huge French window, and got straight to the point. Did Meow Dandang reveal that he had other accomplices that night? I thought about it and said, it's not disclosed. I don't know whether it is there or not. I thought carefully about the conversation with Meow Dandang and found that it was really irrelevant. I felt that he had no accomplices, but it was just a feeling. I feel like in Yueshan's case has reached a bottleneck. I asked, you asked about his accomplice because Meow Dandang was too hard to find. You suspected he had an accomplice and wanted to start with the accomplice to increase the impact of the case. I whispered to myself, go search the Wang family's assets. Of course I can't say that, I can't explain it clearly. And Yushan pinched his forehead, yes. And Yushan carefully looked through my notes from that day and said, you asked him to leave quickly and you stayed to negotiate with the police to buy time for him. Yes, what's wrong? She suddenly raised her head, her eyes suddenly brightened. If he doesn't have an accomplice, then make one up. If he knows you haven't been caught, he will definitely find a way to find you. After all, and Yushan said, you are my recognized 4th brother. My forehead was throbbing. How can I let him know? He is hiding now and won't show up easily, right? And Yushan laid out several blurry surveillance photos of the dark street at that time and analyzed them clearly. He will expose himself and come to you to avenge his elder brother, 2nd brother, and 3rd brother. He will definitely take a huge risk to come to you because of your deception. I interrupted her, don't worry, not only is he taking risks, I'm just dancing on the edge of a knife. I'm not the Little Mermaid. And Yushan looked into my eyes, his cold face serious and earnest, I will live in your house and protect you closely. 2 black lines appeared on my head, get along with the masses. Match with the masses. What kind of fight? Nothing, I asked. How much do you like this job? Is it necessary to do this to be in the same room with a grown man? She was stunned. How do you know I like this job? Hash. I was speechless. Okay, people's police, come if you want. Then I raised my eyes and looked directly into hers, and said word by word, but, I have a request. What request? And Yushan said with his neck stiff, looking as if he was ready to die for justice. I am speechless. This is still too dangerous for me. You are always away, such as sleeping at night or peeing during the day. So, Meow Dandang must not be told that I deceived him, but I can come forward and hint to him that he can come to me and I will help him. When she heard the first half of my sentence, and Yueshan's face changed, as if she was really thinking about whether she should also make sacrifices in sleeping and toileting. When she heard the second half, she understood and nodded at me, okay. How do you give him a hint? I saw that she clearly had her own ideas, but she still asked me this. Are you admitting that I'm extremely smart? I said, I released a police video, which basically showed that I was arrested as Meow Dandang, but I quickly proved through some facts that I am not Meow Dandang and have no relationship with him or any dealings with him. And Yushan was very efficient. He took me to the police station on the spot, took a video of me in a serious manner, and even blurred my eyes. But Meow Dandang was able to recognize it was me. In the video, I distanced myself from Meow Dandang and said, "I really don't know Meow Dandang, you don't have to arrest me. I am an orphan, and the only brother I can consider is a man named Bamian from the orphanage." I still remember that he loved to follow me and call me fourth brother. But we have been separated for many years, and now I am relatively wealthy. I hope to take this opportunity to let him see that, brother, as long as you come to me, I have the ability to help you go home. The policeman asked coldly, "Go home?" I coughed twice. "No, we orphans all hope to find family members, whether they recognize them or not, want to see what home is like." Chapter 15 Divorce. Oh. The policeman said suspiciously. Crack. The video ends here. After recording the video, Yushan frowned and asked, "Who would believe something that looks fake at first glance? And the hint is too obvious. If you don't know, you might think the police station was hacked and posted a spoof video." I patted her shoulder and said, "To solve the domestic people's confusion, it's up to you to ask the writers of the text commentary to write better. For example, enforcement with compassion, arrested the wrong person. The X-City police station shows the warmth of law enforcement, searching for his brother across thousands of miles. Anyway, they know how to handle this matter. As for whether he believes it or not, anyway, if you believe me, as long as he understands the hint, he will definitely believe it. She is about 1.7 meters tall and slender, but still slightly shorter than me. Our eyes met, and when she solemnly said that she believed me, her eyes flashed and she opened her hand on my shoulder. I was stunned. "Why did you hit my hand? How can a people's policeman treat ordinary people like this?" And Yushan turned around and walked away quickly. "I'm sorry." I heard someone greet her, "Senior sister, why are you red hot?" It's amazing that such a cold and ruthless queen can be shy. I got into her supercar again and went to the company. She seemed to have thought about it all the way, and finally couldn't help asking, "How can you be sure that he will believe it?" I looked straight ahead and chatted. I don't know when I started to be so disgusted. When I see a person, I will analyze what he is like. I guess I am quite good at judging people. For example, when Ju Shuajia cheated on me at the beginning, I immediately realized something was wrong, and when I met Meow Dandang that night, I also immediately thought of how he could deal with his lack of brainpower. This seems to be my way of dealing with the world. I have subconsciously seen everything clearly. The only mistake I made was not seeing Ju Shuajia clearly 5 years ago. I don't know if it's love that has blinded me, or if I subconsciously don't dare to analyze it carefully. And Yushan asked, "How do you recognize people? Teach me." As a people's police officer, she really needs this super strong sensing ability that is close to intuition. I said, "How can I teach you this? I don't know how I could do this." Logically, as the daughter of a big boss of a business, you should be able to see through the intrigues and know who is the monkey in which mountain and who is the snake hiding in the ground. I really don't know. She asked, "Logically, a man should be more confident and thick-skinned. Why are you still so sensitive?" I said, "Maybe I have no one to support me." She was silent for a while, then said, "I'm sorry." "What are you sorry for?" She suddenly realized something and asked abruptly, "How do you know that I'm the daughter of the boss of the business?" I waved my hand. Har har. For questions that are difficult to answer, I will just say har har instead. She asked, "You're not collecting information illegally, are you?" I smiled confidently. "How is that possible? Don't just talk about illegal collection. If you check my company, you won't find any illegal activities." She was stunned for a moment and said, "You run a company? The company you work for, is it run by you?" "Yeah, what's wrong?" And Yushan said, "Nothing. You don't secretly think I'm awesome, do you?" And Yushan slammed on the brakes again. This familiar feeling of loss of control. I yelled, "Is it that serious? People's police." She said, "No, we're already there." Har. I got out of the car door that Yushan opened for me with some embarrassment. I couldn't help but feel lucky that she was in casual clothes now. She and I walked towards the company and were greeted by the same gazes as in the morning. Facing these looks, I felt as if I was facing a formidable enemy, with a sharp edge behind me. I said, "Officer An, are you really going to protect me closely?" "Yes." And Yushan nodded coldly without saying another word. I couldn't help but wipe my sweat, then you will pretend to be my bodyguard from now on. And Yushan asked coldly, why do you want to be your bodyguard? She looked conflicted. Then don't be one. If you follow me closely every day, anyone can guess whether you are an adulterer or not. She frowned slowly. 3. You have a family. No, I mean, why should he be a bodyguard and not a policeman? I gave him a caring and sympathetic look. Silly boy, Miao Dandeng just likes to get close to the police, right? She was stunned for a moment, and found that what I said made sense, but she was a young lady at heart, and couldn't stand me calling her stupid, and her expression changed rapidly. I said, People's Police, do you want to be cruel to the people? She said, no. What do bodyguards wear? I narrowed my eyes, and I must have smiled evilly at this moment. Didn't you refuse? Think of a way yourself, I don't want you as a bodyguard. And Yushan was extremely angry, his face was as cold as an iceberg. At this moment, I really want to take out the giant ship Titanic and ram it into the iceberg. She turned and left, not knowing whether she was going to think of some solution. I said in a mean way, hurry up, what if Miao Dandeng comes and you are not here, I will be scared. I saw her pause and quickly returned to the office before she had an attack. After a while, Bai Weiwei came to report, Mr. Chen, the 2 people you brought back, Shen Chuanjiao is very capable and got used to the job quickly. She has already adapted to the job today. And the police officer in Yushan, she is in the human resources department. She said you hired her as a bodyguard and asked for her clothes. I nodded, well, the police, let them go along. Bai Weiwei held a notepad and nodded like a chicken pecking at rice, okay. But boss, did you really hire police officers as bodyguards? Yeah. I responded. Bai Weiwei glanced at me and pushed up her glasses. The expression on his face seemed to be saying, is this really not a personal affair? At this moment, the phone rang. It was Zhu Xuejie's phone call. It is the most familiar yet unfamiliar voice to me, just as warm and gentle as it was 5 years ago. But I felt a chill in my heart. She asked softly, Mr. Chen, Civil Affairs Bureau, are you available? We want a divorce. I responded, like what we talked about last night. Yes, I have brought all the documents. Good. I answered, hung up the phone, and asked Bai Weiwei to prepare some documents for me. I went to the HR department and heard someone there tell in Yushan, we have already ordered your clothes. Missen can work for our CEO Chen first. They will arrive in a day or 2. Okay. Her voice was clear and cold. They had received the message I gave Bai Weiwei as soon as possible and followed Enyushan's instructions to do everything. I knocked on the doorframe twice so they could hear me and know I was coming, then said, I'm going to go out for a while, do you want to come? Go. And Yushan didn't say much and took me to her car. The familiar step on the accelerator, the familiar strong wind blowing on my face, and the familiar feeling of pushing on my back came one after another. I said, how can you drive a luxury car worth hundreds of thousands of dollars in such a way that it makes people suffer? The wind was so strong that she couldn't hear me and asked me loudly, Ho. I asked loudly, why are you driving so fast? You are a rich girl, not a taxi driver. And Yushan stepped on the brakes. I'm used to this. What's the matter? Is it that serious? Chapter 16 Her note. She took 2 breaths, got out of the car, opened the door for me, and said, no, I just remembered that I forgot to ask where we were going. I squinted at her and said, so, why do we need to get off the bus? And Yushan was stunned, sorry, I'm used to it. She pursed her lips, returned to her seat, and asked, where are we going? I said, Civil Affairs Bureau. Civil Affairs Bureau? Don't you have a wife? And Yushan asked. Divorce. Or should I call the driver? It's too troublesome. You still have to wait for Miao Dandeng. Let's make a quick decision and return to the company. After Yushan finished speaking, he drove the car back to the main road and stepped on the accelerator again. Finally arriving at the Civil Affairs Bureau, I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Where is the beauty of life reflected? Every time I run down Anue Mountain. And Yushan and I walked into the Civil Affairs Bureau. They were a handsome man and a beautiful woman, very eye-catching. I called Zhu Xuejie and asked, I'm here, where are you? She said to me in a somewhat anxious voice, take the number first and wait for me. I hung up the phone, took a number, and queued up, chatting with Yushan while waiting. When chatting, she is like a machine. She doesn't smile or find topics to talk about. She just answers whatever is asked, as if she is doing a questionnaire. I said, "Hey, there are so many people coming to get divorced, and they have to queue up." She doesn't speak. I added, "The people's police cannot be so cold." And Yushan glanced at me and said, in response. I said again, "People's police, smile." And Yushan pulled the muscles on both sides of his cheeks towards me and smiled. I got goosebumps all over my body. This was the most real smile without meaning that I had ever seen. I said, "You'd better stop laughing." She looked at me, her face full of speechlessness. The waiting room was almost full of cold couples. And Yushan and I were the only ones chatting casually. When it was finally our turn, the staff thought we were here to get married. "You two, are you going to get married?" I was just about to go to the back and queue up again, but I saw Ju Shuejie jogging towards me from afar. "No, I'm here for a divorce." The staff member was stunned, looked at me and then at Enyushan, and couldn't feel that step, so he opened his mouth to persuade, "Have you two decided? A day of marriage is 100 days of grace, and 100 days of marriage is as deep as the sea." The corner of my mouth twitched. "I'm not divorcing her." The staff were puzzled. At this time, Ju Shuejie finally arrived. She took a few breaths, sat on the chair next to me, and took out all the documents from her bag. The staff member looked at me, then at Yushan, who was standing diagonally behind me and looked very handsome, and finally his gaze fell on Ju Shuejie's generous and gentle face. He coughed and said, "Divorce requires registration and application. You can only get the divorce certificate after 30 days. After 30 days, if either party fails to show up to apply, the divorce will be invalid and the marriage cannot be divorced." I have heard of the cooling off period for divorces before. Ju Shuejie was stunned, her movements froze, her face pale, and she asked, "After 30 days?" The staff member said, "Yes." She turned her head and opened her mouth slightly, not knowing what she wanted to say. I interrupted her with a sneer, "Didn't you ask me to let you go? It's just a cooling off period for divorce. You're not going to stick with me again, are you? What excuse are you going to come up with next?" Every word I say is full of sarcasm, so sharp that it pierces people's hearts. Ju Shuejie closed her mouth and started filling out the information. I saw her nose twitching slightly and her eyes turning red little by little. "Who are you pretending for?" I withdrew my gaze, quickly filled out the information, and handed it to the staff together with Ju Shuejie's information. Today's matter is over. Next is a month, 30 days later. We stood up and walked towards the door one after the other. I noticed that her eyes were always on my back, but I didn't even look at her. "Why are you pretending, Ju Shuejie? You and your old classmate are clearly cheating on me again, and you are clearly flirting with me while you are thinking about how to kill me." Suddenly, I heard the sound of a document falling to the ground behind me. She picked it up, walked over quickly, patted my shoulder, and said, "Did you drop your document? Everything has been submitted, what documents can I drop?" I turned around feeling so cold that it couldn't be colder, but I was stunned. There was a pleading look in her eyes that I was most familiar with. It was not a plea for brand name bags and shoes, nor was it a plea for me to love her and go along with her. It was a plea that stopped me when I was smoking and drinking, a plea that told me to take care of myself, and a plea that said, "Mr. Chen, you have to be happy." I was distracted for a moment, and she had already stuffed the thing into my hand and left quickly. I put the two A4 papers away unnoticed and acted as if nothing had happened. And Yushan looked at me and asked, which was rare, "What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" "Your expression is wrong," she said. I rubbed my face, "Really?" "Yes, but don't worry, I'm close to you and have received special psychological training in micro-expressions, so I can tell." I smiled, but there was no smile in my voice. "Let's go back to the car first." And Yushan actually has some strength. She is not just a VARS officer. She is not very smart in interpersonal relationships, but she has strong professional qualities. This time, after rushing all the way, I had no time to feel the beauty of life. I returned to the office, locked the door, and opened the two A4 papers by myself. Of course, Yushan was there too, and she wouldn't let me be alone no matter what. I opened the two pieces of paper and thought there would be something in between them, but they were still white with no words. "What message does she want to give you?" And Yushan asked with a frown. I shook my head, my face heavy. "I don't know. I don't know anything." Then maybe she was just joking or something. I said, no. Ju Shuejia's eyes today appeared in my mind again. I looked into Enyushan's eyes and said, I am absolutely sure that it won't happen. Enyushan was silent for a moment, then frowned and said, let's try shining a blue light on it. I took a deep breath and said, tell me all the possible means of revealing the words and I'll find someone to try them one by one. Enyushan thought and wrote at the same time, and soon finished a piece of paper. As expected of a police academy student. I asked the secretary to come, but Bai Weiwei had gone to familiarize herself with the affairs of the mining company, so only the old secretary was there. I asked him to prepare everything, but in the end there was no change. Still 2 blank sheets of paper. Of course, I was afraid that it might be damaged during the trial, so I only took one to try. This way, even if one was damaged, I still had one and could still get some information. After trying the last one, Enyushan took a deep breath and said, according to what you said, Miss Ju is an ordinary person. The most convenient and unpopular thing that is not easy to be known by others is this. Soak it in this water and the words will appear. This is the last possibility. We soaked white paper in special chemical liquid, but still nothing happened. Is this really a joke? Chapter 17 Stay away. But, why does she look like that? I sat on the ground, holding up the wet paper, and suddenly saw the one that had been placed next to it and had never been touched. My mood was a mess of twine, and I didn't know what I was doing. I picked up the paper and pressed it on the wet paper. Then throw them aside, press your brows together and close your eyes. To be honest, do I still have feelings for Ju Shuejia? No. Some are just memories and bits and pieces of the past. After all, 5 years has passed, so it always feels a bit heavy. But I think, how can a person who can't even control his own emotions achieve anything great? Enyushan suddenly said, Mr. Chen. What's wrong? I asked in annoyance. The paper has writing on it. Enyushan looked like he had discovered a treasure, and his cold eyes revealed a strong curiosity. Maybe this is a new method for her, worth studying and exploring. But for me, I took the paper out of the potion and held it in my hand, and the words on it became clearer little by little. Be careful Bai Weiwei. There are only 5 words and 1 punctuation mark. Be careful Bai Weiwei. She even added an exclamation mark. Ju Shuejia is a very gentle woman, she always speaks softly and will not speak loudly to others unless it is really an emergency. My heart skipped a beat and beads of sweat appeared on my back. Before I could process this information, a detail that I had overlooked popped up in my mind. First, the information she covered with 2 pieces of paper was a means that even Enyushan was curious about and attracted by. Ju Shuejia is a student who graduated from an ordinary university in X city. I kept her in a greenhouse like a flower and even didn't let her do housework. How could she do such a thing? Bai Weiwei had only come to the company in the past 2 days. How did she know Bai Weiwei? Why be careful of Bai Weiwei? Why did your ex-wife remind you to be careful of Bai Weiwei? Enyushan woke up from his deep thoughts and noticed the words appearing on the paper and asked. I gritted my teeth and said, how should I know? Just at this moment, there was a knock on the door. Bai Weiwei's voice came, Mr. Chen, are you there? Enyushan and I looked at each other. First of all, Bai Weiwei couldn't know about this. But the room was a mess, and I couldn't hide it if she saw it, but I couldn't let her see it, so I said, it's just a private matter, don't come in. Bai Weiwei was silent for a moment, then asked, what private matter? Bai Weiwei, I don't like secretaries who cross the line. You still have nearly a month of internship left, and you can't just become a formal employee and be fearless. Bai Weiwei was stunned for a moment, then said, I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, but I really want to, and I also feel it's necessary to take a look. Then, I heard rustling sounds at the door. I didn't even dare to take the time to figure out where she was. The first thing I realized in my mind was that she was trying to open the door. Enyushan also felt something was wrong and looked at me. Clean up, I said in a low voice. I squeezed the paper dry, folded it into a small square and stuffed it in my trouser pocket. Enyushan gathered together all the messy things scattered on the ground. How? She was referring to how to deal with this pile of things, because these things are concentrated here, and people who understand can tell at a glance what our purpose is, especially the suspicious Ju Shuejia who reminded the suspicious Bai Weiwei. What will happen to her and Ju Shuejia at that time is unknown. But I couldn't care less about that. It was too late for anything else. My thick bulletproof door suddenly opened with a click. I pulled An Yushan over and put my legs between her legs, so that her back was pressed tightly against my chest. I said, "Here's how." I pulled her here with the strength of an adult man. An Yushan reacted little by little, his body stiffened, like a stiff Barbie doll that needed someone to manipulate it before it would move. I guess she must be thinking at this time whether she should use all the methods she learned in training to beat me up and control me. But she didn't move in the end. Bai Weiwei walked in, and I pushed An Yushan onto the desk and yelled, "Get out." She didn't move and glanced around my office. "Do you want to see such private matters? How did you open the door?" I asked angrily. At that time, my trouser pocket could no longer bear their weight and a circle of water stains appeared, right between An Yushan's legs, under his buttocks. I slapped her butt without Bai Weiwei being able to see, scream. She exuded a chilling coldness all over her body, like the Yarmar King in the 18 levels of hell. I said, "Please, Officer An Yushan, Missin, the People's Police, can you help me? Just treat it as serving the people, okay?" An Yushan whispered, "No. No, 26-year-old Officer An, you wouldn't have never seen a movie at this age, right?" I said, "Then close your eyes, raise your head, stretch your neck and take a breath." We all knew that the situation was urgent, and An Yushan was the most aware of the overall situation. He was silent for 2 seconds and did as I said. We both spoke very quickly, and everything happened in a flash. At that time, the office was drawn with heavy light-blocking curtains, and the light was dim. A ray of sunlight shone through the 2 curtains, hitting her outstretched neck and half of her face, and then shining from her collarbone to half of her body, and finally making the wet spot on my pants shine with golden light. An Yushan was so beautiful like this that I was stunned. Just like the sunrise over the 1,000-foot-high snow mountain, the most sacred and inviolable iceberg snow lotus melts away the coldness that keeps people away from it for thousands of miles. Bai Weiwei saw this scene and quickly lowered her head and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, the door is broken and I didn't mean to come in. I was trying to make a joke, but it bounced off when I pushed it. I didn't expect that. Sorry. Get out of here now," I yelled. Bai Weiwei hurriedly withdrew and closed the door. I heard the door click, and after a long time I heard footsteps fading away. I finally breathed a sigh of relief, feeling relieved. Judging from her final serious explanation, she probably didn't see anything. Even though there were a lot of things, she couldn't get close to see them clearly. Fortunately, before we did this, I pulled up the curtains of the floor-to-ceiling windows, and the whole office was extremely dark. An Yushan said, "Why don't you let go?" I was stunned for a moment and quickly let go of his hand. An Yushan took 2 steps forward, lowered his head and silently adjusted his clothes that I had messed up. I scratched my head and said, "Customization is too slow. I'll take you to have it made in the evening for a little extra money." I mean the bodyguard uniform. An Yushan didn't say anything. I feel a little sorry for her. She has a passion for the police profession, but she is also a woman. And today I am using this to force her to make such an embarrassing sacrifice. I apologized to her in my heart and quickly took the paper out of my pants, but the words on it had disappeared, as if there was not enough potion. An Yushan stood over and looked. Seeing that the handwriting had disappeared, he took the paper and scooped some water from the basin and sprinkled it on the paper. Sure enough, the handwriting reappeared. Chapter 18, The Trick. Her face was as cold as before, but her eyes were full of energy. She looked up at me and said, "Mr. Chen, can you let me study this?" At the end, he added, "Although this matter is very suspicious, don't worry, I will protect you no matter what. It's just that we can't file a case now. I can only help you in this matter in my private capacity." I said, "An Yushan. Thank you." She was stunned when she heard this, as if she didn't expect me to say that, because from the time I met her until now, I seem to have always played the role of making her unhappy. She lowered her eyes, her long eyelashes casting a shadow, and she said, as usual. "You are such a good policeman." She looked up at me and said, "Thank you." I smiled and said, "He's also a good friend." "Friends?" she asked in surprise. "You are willing to help me, which makes you a friend in my opinion. Why, you are not happy about it?" She was not happy, so I smiled and said, "Okay, forget it." I didn't have any other thoughts, I just felt that she was just like a child, with a simple mind and a little naive. In the adult world, acquaintances can be called friends. No. And Yushan said, I mean we are friends. I was stunned for a moment, and subconsciously said, if you just say like this, it will be misunderstood. She said, I'm sorry, I haven't made any friends. I was silent, and suddenly thought of an Yushan's identity. Born in such a merchant family, she must have been surrounded by people with bad intentions since she was a child. Since she was protected so well, she must have been strictly restricted from making friends. Thinking about it this way, she and I are really two different types of people, because I am involved with all kinds of people and drink all kinds of alcohol. Because I was at a low point, with uphill roads all around me, I was barefoot early on. I can say in 4 words that there were no taboos along the way, year after year. When I think of this, I think of the ambitious Bai Weiwei. She had a tragic experience not too different from mine, and there was the same unwillingness in her eyes as I did back then. Did she approach me on purpose? This would explain Zhu Xuejie's reminder, be careful of Bai Weiwei. But how did Zhu Xuejie know her? Could it be that she was approaching me on purpose? I shuddered and felt goosebumps all over my body. It seemed as if there were pairs of eyes staring at me from behind and above my head. How could I have such a horrible thought? Later, I smiled at An Yushan and put the incident aside. I called my old secretary Lian, who was going back to his hometown with his wife to build his hometown. He was 51 years old, not tall, a little fat, very experienced in handling affairs, and as round and decent as everyone else. When I was a rookie, he was also being bullied by his boss, so I said, brother, why don't you come with me? He asked me jokingly, you have nothing, how can you hire me? I said, I will give myself 5 years, and after 5 years Chen, will definitely become a successful person. He laughed, it's good to be young. I looked at him and said, brother, life can save you a few more years of youth, why not take a gamble and be young for once? He rubbed his round head and said, you've made me excited. So, let's bet. Of course, I was drunk. At that time, a man of his age could only become a passionate young man after drinking, and only then could he put aside the pros and cons and focus on brotherhood, and bet his bright future on my starting from scratch. Of course, his situation at that time did not have a bright future. S arrival made me successful and also brought new vitality to his own life. He won the bet. I calmed down and asked, Brother Lee, didn't Bai Weiwei go to the mining company to get familiar with it? Why did she come back suddenly? I don't know. He didn't even say hello to me and just came here in a hurry. Lian touched his head. After many years, Ang Li now has no hair on his head. I said, in a hurry. Yes, she ran straight to your office as if she had received some news. Didn't you call her? My heart was filled with turmoil. When did she arrive at the company? Probably 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Lian replied. Arrive at 5 in the afternoon. The company here is an hour away from the suburban mining company, so she received the news at 4 o'clock, and that time was almost the time when I received Zhu Xuejie's paper and came out of the Civil Affairs Bureau. If they are a group that deliberately wants to get close to me, then I suspect Zhu Xuejie is conveying some message to me. Har har, I laughed dryly, maybe I called him and forgot. I then asked about Bai Weiwei's situation, and what she said corroborated each other and was almost the same. I chose to conceal the difference between Lian and Bai Weiwei, firstly because I always felt that this matter was not a small matter, and it was more complicated than the kidnapping of children and the manipulation of evidence that I had seen in the circle before. Secondly, this kind of thing can't even be filed. I really don't want people to believe me when I say this. I hope that Lian will reveal this to the public and everyone will think I'm crazy. In short, we shouldn't alarm the enemy just because we see a little bit of evidence. How does the saying go? When you see a cockroach, it means that in the invisible shadows of your home there are already cockroach descendants who will become emperors for eternity. Besides, Zhu Xuejie and I met 5 years ago when I started my own business. 5 whole years. If my guess is correct, then why did they do this? Why didn't they hurt me in 5 years? In the past 5 years, only Wang Chao. So is Wang Chao one of their people? I have checked Wang Chao's mining business thoroughly and there is no problem with it, so can the group of Burmese people called here be the starting point for intervention? I want to see Miao Dandang so much at this moment. At this time, Lian's stomach started to growl at an inopportune time. He was a little embarrassed and said, Sorry, Mr. Chen, I can't stand hunger when I'm old. It's okay. I came back to my senses and patted his shoulder. Go eat. I turned to Yushan. She really had become my personal bodyguard, following me everywhere I asked, what do you think? Forget it. I patted my head. Let's eat and talk at the same time. I sent someone to fetch 2 employee meals, and returned to the office with Yushan. The pile of miscellaneous items had been hidden under the study by me, and the 2 of us sat at the table and chairs next to the floor-to-ceiling windows. This is the single-person dining table I prepared specifically for dining. Fortunately, sometimes the table is big because there are a lot of dishes, so Yushan can sit on it, which is just right for 2 people. 2 curtains were drawn on our left and right, with only a sliver of light shining on us. After what happened just now, I always felt that I felt twice as safe with the curtains drawn. At this time, there was another knock on the door. The familiar dimness, the familiar Anua mountain, the familiar knock on the door. I stood up in an instant. This time I decided to show my boss's power and take the initiative. No matter what her background or purpose is. Chapter 19: Hostility. Anyway, I don't know about this matter, so no matter how capable Bai Weiwei is, she is just a small clock in my eyes who can be scolded and made to cry at will. I strode quickly to open the door. Bai Weiwei, what's wrong with you? As soon as he finished speaking and looked me in the eye, I was stunned. The person standing at the door was not Bai Weiwei, but Xinchuanjiao. Although Xinchuanjiao had been busy all day, there was no sign of fatigue in her eyes. I clearly saw that the excitement in her eyes quickly turned into surprise, and the next second she showed joy because she realized the content of the voice. I said, sorry, I didn't mean to be mean to you. She moved the employee meal in her hand behind her and tiptoed closer to me. Hey, can I eat with you? I couldn't help but step back to keep some distance, but let her come into the office. No, you. The most striking feature of Xinchuanjiao is her eyes, which are charming and graceful. At this moment, she squinted her eyes slightly, with a smile on her face, as if there were brilliant stars in her eyes that would disappear if she stopped smiling. She said in a charming and coquettish voice, Bai Weiwei made you angry, I will help you vent your anger. As soon as she finished speaking, Xinchuanjiao was stunned. Then her smile disappeared, and the stars in her eyes also dispersed. She looked at Yushan and then at me. I seemed to see her broken. If I could see the inner monologue, then Xinchuanjiao must be thinking at this moment, Bai Weiwei is not here, and this officer and is here again. I laughed awkwardly and said, why don't you go out and eat? I'm really afraid that she'll get angry and no one will be able to eat. Unexpectedly, Xinchuanjiao smiled brightly again and greeted Yushan. Hello, my name is Xinchuanjiao, and I'm Mr. Chen's good friend. How about you? Yushan was as quiet as ever. Yushan. She suddenly looked directly at Xinchuanjiao, and at this moment she looked very much like a queen, and said, she is also Mr. Chen's friend. Our big sister, why are you filling in a sentence? Adding fuel to the fire. I had a bad feeling, and sure enough, the next moment, Xinchuanjiao's smile changed. It's not a change of expression in the traditional sense, but the meaning of her smile has changed. I am very familiar with it after 3 years of companionship. At this moment, her eyes are cold, the corners of her mouth are smiling, and her whole face is bright. Xinchuanjiao smiled and said, oh? Really? This year has been our 8th anniversary. Yushan asked, how come we are still friends after 8 years? Xinchuanjiao's face froze. She was prepared for some sarcasm, but she didn't expect her to ask such a direct question. Xinchuanjiao turned to me and said, Mr. Chen, your friend is very fierce. I ate my rice fiercely. Eat, eat. Oh. Xinchuanjiao put down the lunchbox and felt the light was too dim. She stood up and opened the curtains. Suddenly, the light became bright and sunny. Like her. It's just the dining table for 3 people is now crowded. After dinner, I tried to plant something in Bai Weiwei's phone, but I couldn't get her phone directly, as that would always leave evidence that could be used to attack me, so I gave up. Then I didn't see her until I got off work, so I asked Lian. She went back there in a hurry. Lian explained truthfully. You are in such a hurry this time, you haven't thought about how to face me, right? I think we should make something that receives signals, place it around her, intercept her information traces and look at her information, but such a device will not be very stable. When I got off work, I got into the car of the driver I had been thinking about all day. In order to familiarize herself with the road, Yushan followed behind our car, and this was the first time I saw her drive at such a speed. Xinchuanjiao lifted me up, waved her hand in front of me and said, "Hey, don't look at her. I'll be sitting in front of you. Just look at me." I looked at her. She even blinked twice before asking, "She wants to go home with us." "What do you mean we?" "That's my house." I asked, "Have you found your house?" "There's no suitable one." Shinchuanjia replied and quickly changed the subject, as if she was afraid that I would ask more questions. She said, "If an Yushan lives with us, where will she sleep?" I said, "There is another guest room." Shinchuanjia counted on her fingers. "In that case, I always feel that your room is not enough. Why don't you tidy up Ju Shuejia's room? A lot of unwanted things can be cleaned out." "Oh, by the way, she didn't move her things, right?" I nodded and said nothing. The piece of paper by Ju Shuejia appeared in my mind, and I couldn't utter any pure words. My mouth was full of complex emotions. I suddenly wanted to smoke. "You shouldn't think about it anymore." I asked, "Can you help me sort it out? I don't know how to deal with these things. Would you like a raise, Mr. Chen?" Shinchuanjia winked at me. Shinchuanjia's workability is really good, not to mention that she has a lot of client resources. As soon as I finished speaking, she suddenly leaned over to me. I was thinking about her business ability and didn't react for a moment. When I came to my senses, she had already kissed me. This time, there was no in-depth exploration, just a quick taste. After the kiss, she gave me a provocative look and said, "Thank you, Boss Chen, for the raise. Can I bear it?" "Definitely not." I went over and kissed back. By the time she arrived at the convenience store at the bottom of the community, her hair was disheveled, her cheeks were flushed, her eyes were dazed, and her lips were stained with light and dark lipstick. I said hello to the driver, wiped the lipstick marks on my lips and got off the car. I told them not to wait for me and prepared to buy a pack of cigarettes and then get on. I found something wrong after I came down. Shinchuanjia's lipstick is anti-falling. Because I know a little about Ju Shuejia, this requires professional makeup remover. Is there any convenience store? Obviously not. I had no choice but to ignore the convenience store owner's ambiguous gaze and bought a mask and put it on tightly. After buying the eye, I thought to myself, it would be great if I could meet Miao Dandeng here again. I walked towards the community. The sun had just set and the lights on the earth were gradually lighting up. It was the confrontation between light and darkness, and the handover between the new and the old in the day. And Yueshan's words came from the headset. I seem to see him. Really, as a personal bodyguard, she is really reliable. At this moment, there was a thunder, and drops of water fell one by one. I hid under the shade of a tree, pretending to avoid the rain, and lit a cigarette. The rain gradually got heavier, making crackling sounds as it fell on the ground. Fortunately, there was a platform extending outwards from where I was standing, which blocked some of the rain. Someone rushed in hurriedly to hide from the rain. I turned around and saw that it was Bai Weiwei. And Yueshan's voice came from the headset. Miao Dandeng saw someone and hid again. I know what she wants to say. She needs to track him down. Miao Dandeng has appeared. This opportunity is rare and will never come back. Bai Weiwei was all wet, as if she had fallen. Her knees were red, her white skirt was dirty, and I didn't know where her glasses had fallen. Only then did I realize that her features were very similar to Ju Shuejia's, but her whole face looked younger and more childish, cute and natural. She looked at me pitifully, and opened her mouth as if she was about to cry. "Mr. Chen, why are you here? Why is it raining so heavily all of a sudden?" And Yushan seemed to sigh briefly in the earphones and said, "I'm here, don't be afraid." Chapter 20 Room. I was stunned for a moment. What does that mean? And Yushan is not going to chase Miao Dandeng anymore? I was stunned until Bai Weiwei called me, then I reacted. She stretched out her hand and waved it in front of my eyes, tilting her head and asking, "Mr. Chen, Mr. Chen." I came back to my senses and said, "It's Weiwei, why are you here?" My friend invited me to have dinner here, but when I arrived he wasn't there, his phone wasn't working, and he didn't reply to my messages. Bai Weiwei's little face wrinkled, looking so adorable. Anyone can say, "It's great to be young." I asked, "Do you have any friends living here?" Bai Weiwei paused. She didn't expect that I would focus on this. I felt her brain working rapidly at that moment. She slapped her head and said, "Oh, maybe I just saw the wrong position, so he is not here." I said coldly, "Oh, you can't be so careless. I've never had such a careless secretary. I don't think you can do it. Otherwise, you should find another job. Bai Weiwei paused again. But she quickly thought of a solution again, biting her lower lip and looking at me pitifully, and assured me, Mr. Chen, I'm just a little dull in some things in life. You know my ability when it comes to work. It's not even a month yet. Try me again. Indeed, I could not find fault with anything Bai Weiwei did. If I had not received the message Zhu Xuejie gave me, I would have hired her without a doubt. I nodded and said, I didn't say I had decided not to hire you, but at the very least, you have to tell me how you opened my office door. I don't want you to come in and see me next time I'm doing something. When hearing the first half of the sentence, Bai Weiwei's face froze again, but when she heard the second half, it was as if 3 black lines were hanging down from her head. She put on a confused and eagerly defensive expression and said, I don't know either. I didn't want to see you do this. I just pushed the door and it opened. And Yueshan's voice came from the headset, the magnetic doors like yours are different for every door. It's like a key. Once it's deciphered, you can just swipe the corresponding magnetic card to open it. When I heard this, I thought of the rustling sound coming from the door at that time. If I recalled it carefully, it seemed that it was really the sound of continuous testing of magnetism. I have to find time to change the door. And Yushan seemed to know what I was going to ask, and said directly, of course there is a solution to this. I will think of a solution for you when we return to the company tomorrow. Mr. Chen, what I said is absolutely true. Bai Weiwei raised 3 fingers and frowned. I said, okay, I believe you. She asked again, I don't know when this rain will stop. What should I do on my own? Mr. Chen, you live nearby, right? Yes, but you can take a taxi back. Oh, yes, that didn't occur to me at all. Bai Weiwei quickly raised her phone, and then the screen went black. The phone vibrated, and it turned off and had no battery. She said with a bitter face, Mr. Chen, there is no electricity. I raised the corners of my lips, come, let me get you a taxi, where are you going? Bai Weiwei paused again. Bai Weiwei's Sandun Lakeview town is so terrifying. I made a joke in my mind, but Bai Weiwei rolled her eyes without any sign of acting and fainted. I subconsciously raised my hand to catch her, and heard in Yueshan's nervous voice in my ears, Mr. Chen. Be careful. Check if she has any hidden weapons. I opened her eyes and looked at them carefully. Her pupils were dilated. She was really dizzy. I don't know if she used some method or took some strong medicine. I frowned, no. She said, why not? What if she wants to kill you? You are too naive to understand. She is trying to use a honey trap. Because Bai Weiwei found the right angle and predicted the speed at which I would raise my hand, she let me take advantage of her. Her slender waist was in my arms, one breast was rubbing against my hand, and the other was pressed tightly against me. And Yushan was stunned. She probably took another closer look and understood the situation. She asked, what should we do now? I asked, do you have any suggestions? No, I will protect you no matter what. I put on a fierce smile and said, then I'm going to take her home. Assuming that I tentatively assumed that Zhu Xuejie and this Bai Weiwei are in the same group, whether it's Zhu Xuejie 5 years ago or Bai Weiwei now, just come on, I want to see what you want to do. If you want to harm me, don't even think about getting away alive. If you want to gain some benefits, don't even think about having everything you want. After I finished speaking, I picked up Bai Weiwei and carried her horizontally. At this time, an Yushan walked out from the darkness. She held an umbrella over my head. Fortunately, the umbrella was big, so only Bai Weiwei outside got wet. I took a step and walked steadily towards my residence. Bai Weiwei remained in my arms, still unconscious, and quiet. And Yushan, what do you think is their purpose behind this? I asked in a low voice, but my eyes did not move away from the front. It's really amazing. And Yushan and I have only known each other for a few days, but she always gives me a sense of security. Even if everyone around her is fake, I am willing to believe that she is real. I don't know. And Yushan said coldly as always, but added at the end, don't worry, I'm here, until Miao Dandeng's case is over, I'll be by your side. I smiled and said, you missed Miao Dandeng today. And Yushan shook his head, he will appear again. When I got home, I put Bai Weiwei on the sofa. Shen Chuanjiao heard me come in and ran over with a bright smile on her face. When she saw Bai Weiwei, she froze and asked, "Your secretary? What's wrong? Why is he unconscious? Is he okay?" Shin Chuanjie felt jealous subconsciously and was actually a little worried that something might have happened. "It's okay. I just met her outside. She fainted after getting caught in the rain. I looked at her and said, 'Can you help me find some clean clothes so we can wake her up first?' What's the point of that?" Shin Chuanjie paused and continued, "Can I touch Zhu Xuejie?" "Okay, I've already asked you to do it, right?" Shin Chuanjie smiled when she heard that, like a kitten with a lot of bad intentions, and soon she came back with a set of clothes. "Or, can you help her change it?" I said to Shin Chuanjie. Shin Chuanjie nodded hurriedly, as if it was too late and I would have to change it myself. I was speechless for a moment. She asked, "It's getting dark, is she sleeping at our house tonight?" "My home," I said. "It's my home." There was another woman named Yushan there, so I had to keep silent to save face for her and said, "I guess so. You can arrange it." Shin Chuanjie's eyes turned and she said, "There are 2 guest rooms and 2 master bedrooms for rest in the house. Zhu Xuejie's room will be taken away tomorrow, so she will stay in the remaining guest room." And Yushan said coldly, "I'm here tonight too." Chapter 21 Night Walk. Shin Chuanjie glared at me and said, "Why is she sleeping at home too? A personal bodyguard doesn't have to be so close to me." I coughed twice and said, "And Yushan is a police officer and has a mission. Don't ask too much, but she has to stay with me until the case is over." Shin Chuanjie glared at Yushan angrily, then suddenly remembered something and said to me with blinking eyes, "Then give up my guest room and I will sleep with you. Why don't you arrange for Bai Weiwei to sleep in Zhu Xuejie's room? That way you don't have to sleep with me," I said speechlessly. There are 2 words written all over this woman's face: "Sleep with me." If there wasn't only Bai Weiwei on the paper, I would have thought that Shin Chuanjie also came with a purpose. Shin Chuanjie frowned and said, "No way. Zhu Xuejie left after being tidied up. If she sleeps with someone else again, I won't be able to clean up tomorrow. I feel wronged, so I can only sleep with you." I felt a headache and decided to change the subject. "Let's get back to the point. Change Bai Weiwei's wet clothes." But just as Shin Chuanjie helped Bai Weiwei up, her eyes trembled, and she woke up slowly the next second. When she woke up, confusion and fear flashed in her eyes. What happened?" She sat up quickly, holding her hands in front of her chest, as if she couldn't believe what she saw. Shin Chuanjie smiled slightly, handed her the clothes, and showed the aura of the mistress of the house. "Don't be nervous, you suddenly fainted outside just now, I just want you to change into clean clothes. How do you feel now?" Bai Weiwei was stunned for a moment, then took the clothes and whispered, I'm fine. Thank you. The rain is still falling, and the sound of drops hitting the window seems to be accompanying this unknown contest. And I am ready to meet the upcoming challenge." Shin Chuanjie took Bai Weiwei to the bathroom, and I took Yushan out. At that time, even the driver had gone off work, so I had to get into Yushan's car again like a torture. Fortunately, it's not raining now. And Yushan stepped on the accelerator. I found that I had become damn used to it. She asked, "Where to?" I said, "Mall, go get your clothes made quickly." We agreed on that. The wind was so strong that I could only ask loudly, "Have you forgotten?" And Yushan said, "No." So, in the deep night, Yushan drove her loud sports car, piercing through the city's neon lights like a meteor, leaving the hustle and bustle around her behind. The neon lights on both sides of the street flowed on her car, reflecting colorful light and shadows, attracting the attention of passers-by. With the wheels spinning rapidly, we soon passed through the bustling neighborhood and arrived in front of the brightly lit large shopping mall. Yushan parked the car and went into the mall with me. The interior of the mall was brightly lit and filled with all kinds of shops. Although there were fewer people in other places at night, it was still very lively here. However, our destination is on the top floor of this shopping mall, a place far away from the hustle and bustle, quiet and elegant. Take the escalator to slowly ascend, and enjoy the various beautiful views in the mall along the way. As the hike continues to climb, the surrounding noise gradually fades away, replaced by a fresh and peaceful atmosphere. When you finally reach the top floor, you can't help but be amazed by the scene before you. It is a spacious and bright sky garden, surrounded by various green plants and flowers, and the air is filled with a faint floral fragrance. In the distance, the night view of the city is in full view, with the bright lights and the stars in the sky complementing each other, which is a beautiful sight. There are only a few shops on this floor, and that custom shop is one of them. Originally, bodyguard uniforms were not of such high standards, but when Yushan heard that it would take a week to get the clothes after ordering them, he asked for the pattern and had it delivered to this house at his own expense. Maybe before he became a policeman, when Yushan was still a rich lady, she also came here to order clothes. Yushan and I walked towards that place and heard a man's slightly drunken voice coming from inside. "Hurry up, order her whatever she wants." Then a woman's arrogant voice said, "How come none of your styles look good?" Yushan and I just walked to the door and looked at each other. Both of them were dressed like typical nouveau riche, with gorgeous and slightly ostentatious clothes. The drunken man was wearing a brightly colored mink coat. The women wore tight long skirts that revealed the fat around their waists. Coupled with the temperament and appearance revealed in his words and actions, it was as if a mine had been suddenly discovered at home. "Are you still going in?" Yushan asked. "It's okay. There must be more than one clerk in the store. We can just pay them more money and ask the designer to rush it." After saying that, I walked in and waved to a waiter behind the two of them. One of the waiters who made eye contact with me was happy not to have to face the two men anymore and hurried over to me. "What can I do for you, Sir Orm?" Before I could say anything, the woman in the tights turned around and said, "What's your attitude? Don't you know how to serve me first? First come, first served, don't you understand?" The waiter was startled and stammered, "But there are 3 waiters in front of you serving you." The woman in tights glared at him, just like Zhang Fei. "I want you to come together, what's the matter? You are a waitress who can take the responsibility for delaying the sales of the store." The mink man stood up, turned his head to look at me and Yushan, and shouted, "Come and serve my wife." The waiter was angry and scared, and said, "Sir, please don't make trouble. We have other customers, and there is no rule that one customer should be assigned to all the waiters." "Making trouble?" The woman raised her voice and pointed directly at me and Yushan. "How can they afford anything in their condition? You are neglecting me to serve them, you are the one making trouble." I don't have it," said the waiter anxiously. "Har har, if you are so ignorant, aren't you just causing trouble? I don't need a mirror to see that my face has become darker. Who wouldn't get angry when someone points at their nose and scolds them?" I said coldly, "What kind of monkey thinks he is a human being just because he puts on clothes? Why is he bullying the weak and afraid of the strong by pulling their waiter?" The woman in the leotard had her eyebrows raised. If her hair wasn't so long, I would have suspected that she was going to be furious. She said angrily, "What are you talking about? Do you know who I am? Excuse me, which pond are you from? If you have a problem with your brain, go get it treated instead of shouting all the time. Ask others, I am your father, don't I know it?" The woman in tights was so angry that she was shaking. The man in mink coat ordered the waiter, "How can anyone get in here? Get them out now." The waiter couldn't hold it in any longer and whispered, "You've been here for quite a while, haven't you bought anything?" I was so amused that I couldn't help laughing out loud, and said, "I've never seen anything like this before. This is the first time I've heard a dog say, 'fighting dog.'" The mink man was so angry that he was shaking, and his mink coat was trembling as well. Chapter 22 Top 10 Business Houses. My expression was even more mocking. "Yo yo yo, you are like a teddy bear who is so scared of peeing that he can't stop." At this moment, the mink man couldn't hold back any longer. He approached me at a speed that was not supposed to be possible for someone his size, and punched me. I had prepared myself long ago, with every cell and every muscle ready to go, but I didn't want to fight with him. I wanted to use all my strength to take away his energy, then pretend to be beaten, lie down and call the police. If I don't put him in jail and make him reflect for 2 days, I won't be named Chen anymore. As a result, before the punch got close to me, Yushan hit me in the eye. He was suddenly struck by pain, his balance was unstable, and he panicked. He finally fell to the ground, covering his eyes and screaming. I was shocked and looked at Yushan. "Hey, you are an adult now." She lowered her head and looked at the mink man on the ground. "Yeah." I said, "People's police, did you hit anyone?" She frowned, anger in her cold eyes. "What should I do? If I don't hit him, he will hit you." I was stunned. Was her anger because I called her a people's police officer and teased her at this moment, or because the mink man wanted to hit me? The latter idea was so shocking that I quickly dismissed it from my mind. "You actually beat someone up. I'm going to call the police." The shrill scream of the woman in tights brought my thoughts back to reality, and then I saw the surprise of the waiters and the horror and disgust of the woman in tights. I turned to look at Yushan, officer, and she wants to call the police. Yushan's face was already showing impatience. She took out her police officer ID from her arms and waved it slowly and forcefully in front of everyone. She then took out handcuffs from her pocket and handcuffed the mink man on the ground with his hands handcuffed behind his back in a swift and handsome manner. She looked at the woman in the tights with cold eyes and said, "Call the police. The two of you are suspected of provoking trouble. I will arrest you for investigation." The woman in the leotard felt dizzy and she was about to die. At this time, the mink man recovered and realized the current situation. He sounded sober and said, No, little brother, you and your girlfriend, let's discuss it privately, okay?" Before I could say anything, Yushan said, "Okay." I was a little curious. Isn't Yushan usually too lazy to talk no matter what he does? The mink man was also stunned for a moment, and said, "Then can you help me up first?" The woman in tights glanced at Yushan, took 2 tentative steps forward, and seeing that Yushan had no intention of stopping her, she forcefully helped the fat mink-skinned man up. The woman in tights wiped her sweat. They didn't dare to ask for the handcuffs to be removed. The man in mink coat took a breath and said, "I am the elder brother of the president of Wang's Mining Company, Limited. The company has always been in the hands of my younger brother. He had some problems a few days ago, so I was able to take over temporarily. I was able to have enough money to take my wife out to buy some clothes." He realized that he had said something wrong, and said, "Anyway, I can't get into trouble, or there will be no one left in my house. I beg you to settle it privately. I'll give you 300,000 yuan as a gift for the clothes you're going to buy tonight, okay?" I was stunned and looked at Yushan. This sounds like he is Wang Chao's brother. I asked with a strange look on my face, "Is your brother called Wang Chao?" Yes, my name is Wang Zhua. It's good for you to know that, so you know I'm not joking." The mink man's face flushed, and he looked happy as if he had been pardoned. I smiled and said, I know. Wang Zhua and Mrs. Wang laughed with me. Suddenly, my smile faded. "Then we can't settle this privately." Wang Zhua was stunned. I laughed and said, "Just kidding. I said I won't settle it privately because since they are Wang's family, it's not a big deal. They are just brothers joking." Wang Zhua came back to his senses and nodded quickly, saying, Yes. I said, "But what about you and your wife scolding me earlier?" Wang Zhua quickly nudged the woman next to him with his shoulder. "Why don't you apologize to them? You keep your mouth open all day but don't know how to use it. By the way, what's your name, brother?" I smiled and said, "Mr. Chen." At the same time, I observed his expression closely, not missing any of it, but to no avail. There was nothing wrong with his expression. In other words, even though he is Wang Chao's brother, he doesn't know me. At this moment, Mrs. Wang was like a flame that had been extinguished, with only billowing grey smoke left. She was mute. She said in a hoarse voice, "I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, Mr. Chen, I'm sorry, your girlfriend is sorry too, sorry." And Yushan said before me, "Okay. I am too lazy to correct Wang Zhua's wife." Just then, there was a commotion at the escalator. I looked back and saw a group of people walking towards us. The leader was wearing a particularly well-fitting suit and was walking towards us with vigorous steps. The waiter explained, "I'm sorry, customer. I saw the situation was urgent just now, so I used the direct contact button to notify the manager." "Nothing," I said, thinking it was just a greeting. But he didn't notice that Yushan's expression changed. When the group of people approached, I saw the waiter called to a person behind him on the right, Manager Fan. Manager Fan waved his hand and said to the man in the middle, "The boss happened to come to our mall today, so we just happened to come together." The leading waiter quickly said to the man in the middle, "Bossin." He raised his hand, his eyes stayed on Yushan's lowered face for a few seconds, and asked, "What happened?" The waiter said, "Bossin, the matter has been dealt with. Just now, this boss brought his girlfriend to look at clothes and encountered those two people looking for trouble. At first, they talked about calling the police. I was afraid that it would affect them all, so I quickly pressed the direct line to notify you. Now both parties have settled it privately. This boss brought his girlfriend to look at the clothes." Mr. N repeated this sentence and turned to me. Asked, "What's your name, boss?" I said, "Mr. Chen." "Mr. Chen." Oh, a rising star, not bad, quite capable. Mr. N seemed to have searched for some information about me in his mind. I smiled and said, no one is as capable as you. You have been sitting firmly on the top of the top 10 business houses for so many years. But Mr. N, don't worry, your daughter, Officer N, stays by my side for the mission. She is not my boyfriend or girlfriend. This man's surname is N, and he's the boss of this shopping mall. Who else could it be but N Xingyi, the local tyrant of City X? And this big boss in Xingyi is N Yushan's father. When N Yushan heard this, he raised his head and looked at me. I didn't look at her. And Xingyi narrowed his eyes, and his full aura emanated from him. At this moment, the waiter, the manager following N Xingyi, and everyone else present, including Wang Zhuo and his wife, were all stunned. They probably couldn't imagine that this woman was the one N Xingyi had hidden away and never shown up, and they didn't expect that I would be so casual with her daughter. And Xingyi repeated slowly, not boyfriend and girlfriend. Chapter 23 Stay overnight. I was about to answer, but N Yushan once again rushed before me and said, Dad, don't disturb me while I'm working. The aura emanating from N Xingyi paused and dissipated invisibly. I don't know if it was because my eyes were blurry, but the look in his eyes when he looked at N Yushan was full of kindness, not at all like that of a big boss. Okay, I won't bother you anymore. And Xingyi said this softly, then glared at me fiercely, looked at me, and slowly said to others, if everything is fine, just go away. Now it's my housework. The rest of the people dispersed quickly. But the waiters in this store looked at each other, as if there was nowhere to hide, and were about to sit at the cashier, or consider whether to leave work on the spot. I said, wait a minute, the people in the store, please wait a moment. And Xingyi frowned slowly. I smiled at him and said, I brought Officer N to look at the clothes. If the waiter is off duty, it would be a waste of time. And Xingyi's brows relaxed, yeah. How come this dad can only say mum? I complained in my mind and gave the waiter the order number and asked if it could be expedited. The waiter checked and said, Sir, this is a rush order. It says it's ready, but it hasn't been delivered yet. I nodded and asked, what's the good part? The waiter told me a place a little bit out of the city. I thought about it and decided to go and pick it up since I had nothing to do tonight anyway. If I don't go, I don't know what N Xingyi is going to talk about. For some reason, I don't want to face him when I'm with N Yushan. It always feels awkward. I explained the situation to N Yushan, and after getting his approval, I said to N Xingyi, Bossin, let's go get the clothes. Why don't we do it next time? Without waiting for him to finish, N Xingyi said, it's okay, I'll go with you. I was stunned for a moment, and looked at N Yushan, who said simply, no. I sat in N Yushan's car, the seat belt tied around me, my body piercing the gaze of N Xingyi in the back seat. In the end, he insisted on following us. N Yushan started the car and stepped on the accelerator again. N Xingyi's gaze finally disappeared from behind me for a moment, but after a while, when he adapted, he stared at me again. It's like sitting on pins and needles, with the sword at your back. Fortunately, N Xingyi started chatting with N Yushan and found topics to talk about, so I have to say that my pressure was reduced a little. He asked, yeah, what case are you working on recently? Looking for the dog, Auntie Wang's dog is lost. Oh, are you tired then? Not tired. I thought, this N Yushan still knows how to lie. Is he afraid that N Xingyi will know the danger and will not let her work as a police officer? Then why doesn't he investigate it himself when he has great power in X City? Unexpectedly, N Xingyi suddenly lowered his voice and asked, then why are you following Boss Chen? What does this have to do with the case you are following? I felt N Yushan's body stiffen. And Xingyi took out his phone and said, I'm going to ask your director. It was clearly agreed that she would just have the experience. I want to ask him what case he has arranged for you. I think it's a particularly dangerous and major case involving overseas criminal gangs. Before he could finish his sarcastic remark, N Yushan slammed on the brakes. You are looking for a dog. You promised me not to interfere with my work. I was almost vomiting my food because of the shaking. I looked up and saw N Yushan staring at me. I had to calm down and said, Auntie Wang is the cleaner of my company. Usually the dog is in the company. She is the closest to me and will come to find me. Officer N follows me just to see if the dog will come to find me. The others were looking for the dog, and N Yushan was only responsible for following me. It was a leisurely thing, right? It couldn't be more leisurely. And Shinny also recovered from the sudden breaking and said, then take her to buy clothes. Get off the car. And Yushan said, we're here. After she finished speaking, she didn't forget to open the door for me after she got out of the car. When I got out of the car, I always felt that Shinny's gaze on me was as real as if it was going to pierce through me. This place in the suburbs is in the style of a villa. After entering the gate, it doesn't feel like a villa, but rather a series of design areas. This is where the brand's clothes are produced, without any factory assembly lines, and are handmade by professionals from start to finish. I verified my identity and brought in Yushan and his daughter to the waiting room. There is a large sofa inside, a small sofa on the side, and a soft white blanket on the floor. They are all made of genuine leather and are very soft whether you step on them or sit on them. There was a small round table in front of the sofa. After sitting for a while, someone brought tea and dessert. Not far from the sofa, there was a curtain that separated the room from end to end. On the other side of the curtain were exquisite clothes and mirrors. After a while, someone came in carrying a dark red box. And Yushan took the clothes in the box, and we were about to leave when Shinny said, yeah, change into them and show them to daddy. I haven't seen you wear a skirt since you grew up. And Yushan said, it's not a skirt. You kid. And Shinny said gently, can't you wear it for daddy to see? He looked at me with fierce eyes. Why is it that the clothes ordered by Boss Chen cannot be seen in public? I said, Bossin, it's not what you want. Then let my Yushan wear it. Boss Chen, you won't mind, right? I don't mind. How could I dare say I minded? And Shinny's eyes were piercing me to death. And Shinny turned to look at Yushan. And Yushan glanced at me, then took the box and walked into the curtain. The waiter hurriedly followed him in. I thought, something bad is going to happen. If Shinny knew that I let her daughter be my bodyguard, would he turn me into a bunker? And Shinny had a look of anticipation on his face, and then he saw Yushan walking out in an exquisite black suit. The black boots reflected a dark luster, and the black pants were just right. Their whole outfit was handsome, and there were gold hooks on the cuffs. Although this suit is exquisite and handsome, with many careful details and improvements to the style, and Shinny is very familiar with it. This is a bodyguard uniform. He widened his eyes and asked tentatively, yeah, did you make a mistake? And Yushan was ruthless, no. And Shinny said, you. She curled her lips and smiled, I am Mr. Chen's bodyguard now. And Shinny's body trembled, and he looked at me with murderous intent. This Yushan. Isn't this just asking for trouble? I waved my hands and said, no, Bossin, it's not a good idea for officer and to follow me every day. In order to make sure she doesn't get gossiped about, I asked her to pretend to be my bodyguard first. And Shinny frowned and said, really? Does she need to follow you every day for work? Is she so inseparable that people will gossip about her? And Shinny seemed to suddenly remember something, and his whole body was gloomy, but he still cared about Yushan and asked in a kind tone, it's so late, where are you from? Where are you going later? Chapter 24, All Shows of Gold and Jade. He stared at me motionlessly, and his amiable tone sounded to me like the voice of a ghost demanding his life. And Yushan said calmly, Mr. Chen, do you have any objection? I will stay at his place tonight. And Shinny said, no, as long as Yaya is happy. Then he looked at me sinisterly and said, it's just too much trouble for Mr. Chen, isn't it? Why don't you let Yaya go home tonight and come back the next day? I thanked God and was about to agree, but Yushan once again said before me, no. What? You guys won't let me leave work at night. What case are you following? When it comes to this, Yushan is like a cat whose tail has been stepped on, unable to utter a word. I quickly said, the clothes are ready, officer, and just come to the company tomorrow. And Yushan looked at me, her eyes made me feel like I was a heartless person who would not recognize me after pulling up my pants. I couldn't stand it anymore, so I asked, according to what Mr. N said, there is no reason to work overtime at work. I thought that after moving to Shinny, Yushan would understand my hint I can't do anything, you just listen to her. Unexpectedly, when Yushan looked up again, he said something shocking, I want to take Chen Xin home with me. I was stunned. And Shinny was also stunned. I said, no, it's too much trouble. Okay, Dad supports your career. And Shinny interrupted me. I was stunned again, and this time I was the only one stunned. In fact, it is not difficult to guess what Shingy is thinking. If he forces his daughter to do something, her beloved daughter will hate her father. It would be better for everyone to take a step back and be happy. What's more, he feels at ease because I'm under his nose. When I came to my senses, I had already arrived at the infamily villa. After a hard day's work, Shingy went to the study accompanied by his housekeeper to tidy up and change into comfortable home clothes. A servant came up to me, brought me a pair of slippers and said, "Sir, I will take you to the guest room first. When you are ready, just come to the bedroom to find Mr. N. Good." At the same time, Yushan stopped me and said, "I'll take it." The aunt laughed, said, "Oh," waved her hand, and turned and left. I looked at Yushan, but she turned her head away from me and walked forward, so I had to follow her. I asked, "Do you usually live here?" "No, I rent a house." I asked again, "Why?" "Close to work, convenient." Chatting with Yushan is always like squeezing toothpaste, only a little comes out after a little squeeze. I had nothing to say, but she glanced at me from time to time, as if waiting for me to speak. I asked, "Don't you have anything you want to ask me? Why do you want to talk to me but wait for me to ask?" Yushan thought about it and said, "Yes." "What? Is it true?" I suddenly became curious about what she would ask. Yushan asked, "What do you think of me?" I was stunned for a moment, and subconsciously asked back, "Do you like me?" I have experienced so many years of social abuse, so when I hear this kind of words, it feels like they are quietly asking, "Do you like me?" She said, "No." I felt a little embarrassed and said, "That's right. You just met me and don't know my past. You don't know if I'm a good person and you're easily deceived." Yushan suddenly stopped and turned to look at me, "But if I like you, it doesn't matter if I don't know your past, because I like you now, and it doesn't matter if I'm deceived." Her eyes were brightened by the light above her head, and the teardrop mole at the corner of her eyes became more obvious under the light, making her look so cold and pure that she didn't seem like an earthly being, but the worldly affairs were floating in her eyes. I don't know if it was because the moment was too beautiful or because those words were too confusing, but I was stunned for a moment. When I came back to my senses and wanted to see what was in her eyes again, she turned around and continued to lead the way. "Just if," she said. After going up the stairs and turning a corner, one wall was filled with bedrooms, and on the other side was a half-person high railing. Below the railing was a small area of pseudo-ecological green plants, about 2 stories high, and there were vines climbing along the wall. I asked, "Won't these plants grow well indoors?" Yushan said, "No, there is a functional light." Oh tilde, I understood, it was like the lamp used for soilless cultivation. "You can rest here." Yushan pointed to the first room in this row and said. I said, "Okay, I'll call Shinchuanjiao and tell her we won't be coming back." Yushan nodded. I raised my phone, but before I could make a call, someone came over. I heard footsteps, but before I saw anyone, I heard a slightly shrill female voice, which sounded weird and not very pleasant. "Hey, sister, you can bring someone home too." The next moment, her figure appeared at the corner wearing fancy clothes, complicated jewelry, with her chin slightly raised, and she looked down on everyone. Yushan frowned and asked, "What? Why can't I come and see you?" "Cannot." Okay, my mom heard from the servants that you would be back tonight, so she asked me to come and ask you to eat sweet cakes." Yushan's brows relaxed, and I felt it was because he mentioned this woman's mother. The woman took one last look at me, from head to toe, then turned and left. I asked, "Your half-sister? If it's a mother, you wouldn't say my mother, right?" Yushan shook his head, "They are relatives." Relative? I immediately thought of Ju Shuejia's relatives, and subconsciously I didn't have a good impression of them. My mother passed away early. My father was afraid that I lacked maternal love, and outsiders were worried, so he brought my aunt to live with us. My aunt is my mother's cousin. She was divorced and raised me, my sister, Zhang Shui. So that's how it is. I understood in my heart that Yushan was protected so well, which showed that her aunt was quite good, and not all relatives were bad. Yushan added, "My aunt is very good. She supports my career and encourages me to do what I want to do." So, I hid it from my father this time and followed up on Miao Danding's case. I was stunned. Something is wrong. Something is wrong with this aunt. There's a feeling that you're coaxing me on the surface, but actually harming me. Yushan is already 26 years old. Could my aunt still be stupid? Is this unintentional or intentional? I asked, does she know that you followed up on such a dangerous case? And Yushan said, I know. When she first heard about it, she was anxious to persuade me and even wanted to tell my dad, but I stopped her and convinced her. Can you convince the people who truly care about you? I'd like to let you stay at my house for a while. Can Anshini be convinced even if he's ready to die? Why are you worried about outsiders? In fact, you may be more worried about your relatives. I said to Yushan, do you want to eat sweet cakes? You are. I won't go. I will accompany you to meet my dad later. It was like meeting the parents. I suppressed the wrong feelings in my heart and said to Yushan, I'd better go. I want to meet your aunt. If she really is not a good person, I will find a way to let Anshini see her true face. It turns out that although the family looks so beautiful, there are also some rotten things inside. Chapter 25, Scheming. Yushan said, will it delay my meeting with my father? This woman is still worried that I will leave a bad impression in front of Anshini. I said, it's okay, let's walk faster and just say hello. Yushan thought about it, nodded, and took me away. After several turns, we arrived at a small living room. Zhang Shui and her daughter played soothing music, and two masseurs stood behind them, giving them massages. Yushan called out, Aunt. The woman on the sofa sat up straight and waved, yeah, you're back. Come quickly. Yushan's expression was unusually gentle, no, Auntie, we still have to go to the living room. Are you going to see Shini? Yeah. Yushan nodded. I say, sister, do you have to give people misunderstanding like this? Only later did I find out that Yushan once thought that by letting everyone misunderstand her like this, she could deceive herself and pretend that she really owned me. If I were to be here now, I would definitely say to her, tell her you liked me earlier, Yushan. Of course, that's all in the past. Yushan's aunt looked at me and asked, what's your name? Their voice is kind. I said, my name is Mr. Chen, hello. I felt that the expressions of Zhang Shui and her daughter changed. In X City, my name is not very well known, but if someone is looking for people within the scope of young talents, I will definitely be one of them. I think Zhang Shui is of marriageable age, but she is still not married. She probably wants to take advantage of the family's power to marry a rich man. My aunt said, Mr. Chen, I have long heard of your name. My last name is Zhang, and you can call me Aunt Zhang. Her voice also became more enthusiastic. I said, not really, just a small business. Aunt Zhang glanced at Zhang Shui and asked kindly, child, how did you get to know my yaya? How long have you been together? I glanced at Yushan and saw that she had no intention of speaking, so I said, we met at work, it hasn't been long. Yushan turned his head quickly and looked at me. She didn't often have big expressions, but at this moment her eyes were much wider. Shock was written all over his face. I just wanted to try this mother and daughter duo again, so I didn't rush to deny it. After bidding farewell to Zhang Shui and her daughter, Yushan and I walked towards the living room. I said, I'm sorry, I didn't deny Aunt Zhang's misunderstanding just now for a reason. Yushan was still cold, it's okay. She didn't even ask me why. When I went to the living room, Anshini was sitting inside drinking tea. When he saw me, he asked me to sit down. After explaining the reason for my late arrival in a few words, I said, Mr. An has been working hard all day, it's almost time for him to rest. I'll stay here for one night, no need to entertain you. Yushan said quickly, we have to live here until we find a dog. In an instant, I felt that Anshini's eyes became even more fierce. He looked at me and said, Boss Chen, please do me a favor and let me stay at my humble home for the next 2 days. Is that too much trouble? This look, this expression, does he want me to agree or not? This. Yushan once again said, no trouble. It works, but. I said, I'm not a bother, but Mr. An is too much trouble. Anshini paused, and saw Yushan looking at him without saying anything. He coaxed softly, Dad doesn't think it's a bother, no. Yushan looked at me, no trouble. I agreed reluctantly, and my reluctance made Anshini's mouth twitch. That's right, it's not where I want to live. In the final analysis, it's just for the convenience of Yushan. Anshini, who are you showing this face to? I felt so happy. I straightened out my attitude with Anshini, and after that we were all successful big bosses, and we chatted and drank tea normally. The awkwardness at the beginning was gone. I guided the topic and talked to Nshingi about the support behind the scenes. Nshingi said, "It is so lucky to have someone supporting my career from behind. When I encounter setbacks or feel sad, it feels like I have a boost." I said, "Yes, just like Officer N, he is lucky to have someone supporting him." Nshingi was stunned for a moment, then said, "I do support my daughter in pursuing her dream." It seems that Nshingi doesn't know that Nyushan's aunt supports her. I guess in front of Nshingi, this aunt will pretend to be worried, very unsupportive, and very reluctant, just afraid that Nyushan will be in danger. I said, "Then Officer N is doubly lucky." Nshingi really felt something was wrong this time. He said, "Mr. Chen and I hit it off right away. Yeah, can you go to my study and get that delicious tea? The one at the bottom." And Nyushan asked. "Yes, look carefully. It's okay if you search slowly. Don't mess up my place." After Nyushan left, Nshingi no longer spoke with a soft and kind voice. He frowned and asked me, Who supports her? Her cousin Zhang Shui, or her aunt Zhang Shuangyin?" I deliberately said, "Mr. Chen doesn't want anyone to support Nyushan. Then why do you still support her?" And Nshingi's expression was like a certain Qu Xiaohuang's face, and his expression kept changing. He said, "Let her experience it, but I don't mean to support her and let her go into danger and jump into the fire pit." I laughed and said, "And always wants no one to support her randomly, right?" I was about to say, "Then you're right. Her aunt is just blindly supporting her to go into danger." Before we could say anything, Zhang Shui and Zhang Shuangyin arrived. The clothes are not as lazy as those in the small living room. And Nshingi asked, "Why are you here?" "There are guests here, you?" Zhang Shui said sweetly, "Uncle, you haven't rested yet, let me pour you some tea." And Nshingi wanted to refuse, but couldn't say it, so he looked at me. I said, "It's okay, just pour it if you want to, don't let the child down." Zhang Shui was stunned for a moment, then put on a smile and said, "I'm already 26 years old, only 4 years younger than you." I pretended to be surprised, "Do you know how old I am?" Zhang Shui was stunned for a moment, perhaps realizing that she had let the cat out of the bag, and added, Har, Mr. Chen is so amazing, of course he is famous." I smiled back, "So what were you doing at the age of 26? Tsukiyama is already a very capable police officer, so I guess you are pretty capable too." Zhang Shui paused, her face slowly turned red, and she looked at her mother, not knowing what to say. Zhang Shuangyin said, "Xie Xue is still studying abroad at the Nigel Academy of Fine Arts. She is also very impressive." I understood it in my heart. He must have spent money to gain experience, otherwise Zhang Shui would have said it at the beginning. As for where the money came from, it was undoubtedly from the Yin family. And Nshingi finally interrupted, "It's so late, aren't you going to bed yet?" Zhang Shuangyin said, "We came here to see Ye's boyfriend. We were about to go to sleep, but this is such an important matter. I watched Nyushan grow up, so I should come and see him." Seeing Nshingi's shocked expression, I quickly said before him, "Yes, but let's talk about it tomorrow morning. Uncle N is tired too." Zhang Shuangyin said, "Yes, your uncle will have a charity event tomorrow." Chapter 26 Waiting for the Autumn Wind. I was stunned for a moment, a little surprised, because I also have to go to the charity meeting tomorrow. Zhang Shui and her daughter left. And Nshingi turned to look at me and asked, "Are you Ye's boyfriend?" This familiar embarrassment and oppression enveloped me again. I said, "No." "Then why?" I looked at him seriously and said, "I asked you before, you don't want the kind of support that disregards your own safety, right?" And Nshingi nodded, "Yes, you mean they secretly support Nyushan like that. Let me ask you first, why did Nyushan, a young lady who was born with a silver spoon in her mouth, want to be a police officer when she grew up? Don't say it's a matter of personal preference. Hobbies are cultivated through influence from what you see and hear. And Nyushan must not have had any special experience that made her suddenly want to be a police officer, right?" And Nshingi listened to what I said and his expression became more and more serious. I said, "I know some of the things you said are ridiculous, but you definitely don't want Nyushan to be in any danger. This kind of thing doesn't allow for trial and error. It's better to just stick with this misunderstanding and let it go. We'll wait and see what they are like." And Nshingi remained silent for a long time. He looked at me as if he wanted to see through the skin on my bones and see the internal organs protected under each of my bones. The most important things to a man are his wife, daughter, and mother. Facing in Shinyi, we seem to have changed from two business bosses to two men. There was no twists and turns, no intrigue, it was just the purest conversation between men. Finally he said, "Then I'll listen to you and wait for the autumn wind. I really didn't pay enough attention to some things. If it turns out to be as you said, I will definitely reward you handsomely. If the truth comes out in the end and it's not what you and I thought, then and also thanks you for your concern for Yaya, but it's just thanks. I won't marry Yaya to you." I said with a smile, "Bosson, there is really nothing between me and officerin. You don't want to call me uncle anymore." And Shinny snorted. Come on, I'd never seen her open a car door for anyone. I touched my nose, and was embarrassed to say that I actually took advantage of Yueshan's persistence and innocence in being a people's policeman to get her to open the car door for me, speak to me in a nice way, and trick her into being my bodyguard. And Shinny snorted, "It's almost time to rest. Are you going to the Bayren Charity Association tomorrow as well? I think I saw you on the list." I said, "Yes." "Then let's go together tomorrow morning." At this time, Yushan came back with tea cakes. There was a thin layer of sweat on her forehead, and she said, "Have some tea." And Shinny touched his nose and said nothing. I said, "It's too late, it's almost time to go to bed." She was stunned for a moment, put the tea on the table, and said, "Okay. I'll take you back." I stood up and turned around to say hello to Shinny, but I was met with his hostile gaze. "What's going on?" I was stunned. "Didn't you say that we should take a break? It's not like I made Yushan go there in vain. Could it be that? And Yushan doesn't care that I made her make a wasted trip, and you, and Shinny, are glaring at me because of this?" The next second, I suddenly thought of a possibility. And Shinny might have timed Yushan to come back at this time, and then he didn't say anything, so that I could suggest going to bed and become the bad guy who made her make a wasted trip. He wanted Yushan to hate me and have no good feelings towards me, but it turned out that he didn't care at all. I'd be angry if I changed, but if I didn't, I'd just think, har 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 har. On the way, Yushan asked, "Are my sister and aunt coming to the living room?" "Yeah, how did you know?" "I saw them on my way back." She was silent for a moment and then asked, "Zhang Shui, she dressed up. Do you think she's pretty?" I was stunned for a moment, I didn't pay attention. There is no further text after that. I don't know if it was an illusion, but Yushan's expression didn't change, but I felt like she seemed a little happier. When I reached the door of the room and separated from Yushan, I remembered that I had not yet called Shinchuanjiao. I looked at my phone and there was not a single call. I opened the message box and there were more than a dozen messages. She started by asking, "Where are you going?" Later asked, "Do you not want to come back with your little bodyguard? Did you check into a hotel? Did you have fun?" Later on it turned into mumbling. Mumbling and mumbling, every word is about missing you. Why didn't you tell me where you were going? Are you not replying to my messages and kissing me passionately? Bai Weiwei fell asleep in her room, very quiet, and didn't talk to me. There is a client who seems to be just one step away from a deal. He said that if I can be his female companion for a day tomorrow, we will sign a contract. Do you want to go? I'm so hungry. I cooked a bowl of noodles. Do you want me to save some for you? Ignore me, I'm playing by myself. I miss you so much, Mr. Chen. The corners of my mouth lifted unconsciously, and I typed, "Why didn't you call?" She replied almost immediately, "I'm afraid I'll affect your happiness. Even if my happiness is with others." I asked deliberately. "Yes." She said, "If you are happier with others than with me, then I won't affect you from having fun with others. Then you will be unhappy." This time, after a long time, the light on my phone dimmed and the screen became almost black, and then it suddenly lit up again. Shinchuanjie replied, "No. If you are happy, I am happy." Even through the screen, I seemed to see her smiling eyes. It seemed that when Zhu Shuejie and I were talking about marriage, I had already become estranged from her because of Zhu Shuejie. I forgot whether I invited her to the wedding, but I remember that she came at the end. She just got out of the car, looked at me from a distance, and opened her mouth to say something, but it was too far away and I couldn't hear clearly. I was too busy at that time, and someone called me the next second. I forgot what the urgent matter was, but I turned around and left. I didn't see her at the dinner table later. Now that I think about it, her mouth shape seemed to be, "I wish you happiness." I typed to her, no matter how big the client is, you don't have to sacrifice it. I will support you and I have enough money. I paused for a moment and changed it to, the company supports you, so we are not short of money. I said, let the driver take you to the company tomorrow. I have something to do tomorrow, so I want to go with you. She replied, okay. Go to bed early. Aha. After sending it, I put my phone aside and fell asleep soon after. The next morning, at 12 a.m., my biological clock made me gradually more conscious. Then I remembered a knock on the door, and I woke up. And Shinny was afraid that I overslept, so he sent someone to wake me up. I answered, but after a while, the knock on the door came again. Could it be Enyushin? I quickly put on my clothes, got up and opened the door. It was just dawn, and the sky was white in the east. It turned out to be Zhang Shui standing outside the door. She was wearing a white dress, fluffy and pretty, holding a glass of milk in her hand and saying, "Good morning, Mr. Chen." Chapter 27 Breakfast. I didn't say anything. 1 second, 2 seconds. Zhang Shui's hand, which remained in the extended position, began to tremble, and circles of translucent milk swayed out of the transparent cup. I smiled and said, "You can't drink milk on an empty stomach, it will make you sick." Zhang Shui. Xie Shui was inconsiderate. Then, "Mr. Chen, will you come and have breakfast with us? I don't want to eat anymore." I curled my lips into a smile and closed the door. I glanced at the time, 7:30. I brushed my teeth and washed my face slowly, then opened the door and went out. Coming towards me is Enyushin. This morning she wore a slim long dress, simple and elegant, and her blue earrings were faintly visible under her neat short hair. She wore light makeup, which made her look even more pure and innocent. She was worth admiring from afar but not being touched or played with. I was stunned by her beauty again. And Yushan tucked her short hair behind her ears and said, "Shall I take you to have breakfast?" I said, "Okay, your earrings look beautiful today." And Yushan glanced away, and his slender white fingers brushed across the round and pink earlobe. His voice was as emotionless as always, and he said, "I'll give you one." What? The next second, before I could stop him, and Yushan had already picked one up smoothly and handed it to me. I waved my hands. "No, I was complimenting your beautiful earlobes, that's just a compliment, not to." And Yushan pursed her lips and turned to face me. I paused and she unbuttoned my suit jacket one by one, pinned the earrings in my shirt pocket, and then buttoned my jacket one by one. When she lowered her head, I could clearly see each strand of her hair and smell the scent of shampoo coming from her hair. Gardenia scent. It smells like gardenia. Then, I realized belatedly that I didn't stop her, I didn't dodge, step back, or shout at her. I just stood there and let her take off my clothes. I was silent. I followed Yushan all the way to a small kitchen, and it suddenly occurred to me that she wasn't going to take me somewhere for breakfast, she wanted to cook it herself. This small kitchen, although small, has everything it needs. It has a large window, and outside the window is a green lawn and a wall. Why is there such a kitchen? And Yushan said, "When I was a child, I wanted to be a cook." I laughed and said, "Then why did you want to be a policeman?" After the MasterChef cartoon was over, I saw the one about being a police officer and I wanted to be one at that time. My aunt also supported me and took me to learn more about it. After that, I always wanted to be a police officer when I grew up. I was silent for a moment, then changed the subject by asking, "What do you want to do for breakfast? Is it too late to make it now?" And Yushan said, "There's still time, let's make steamed buns." To me, this meant, let us not have breakfast, we'll be busy all morning and then rush to the meeting with Xingyi. My mouth twitched and I asked, "Have you ever done this before?" "I have done it. I remember it. I remember I told the aunt at home, kneaded the dough, let it rise, and then steamed it before eating. The program is probably correct, but..." I said, "Will it be too late? It will take a long time." And Yushan said, "I know, but my dad can arrive later, so it doesn't matter if we leave later." I thought, and Xingyi can arrive late, but I can't. My business is not that big. Never mind. It won't affect anything anyway. The media won't arrive until the evening. It doesn't matter if I'm a little late in the morning. At most I'll get scolded by those guys behind my back. I said, "Okay, let's get started." And Yushan was a little unfamiliar with the technique, but he managed to do it with ease and composure. I asked, "Are you afraid of getting your clothes dirty?" "Afraid." And Yushan said without hesitation. I could see that she brought me here on a whim and had no serious intention at all. I recalled that when passing by the kitchen in the house, and Yushan paused, as if he wanted to go in and see someone inside. At that time, Zhang Shui must have been eating breakfast there. She didn't want me to meet Zhang Shui, so she brought me here on a whim. The flower stirred up circles of dust in the air. I asked in Yushan, "There's a scarf over there. Do you want to wear it?" "I don't have any free hands." I picked up the apron and put it on her. And Yushan paused and said, "Thank you." The sound is soft, like a mosquito's buzz. She worked for a while, and then her hands got sore, so I took over. At this time, there was no flying flour, but there was some on the edge of the chopping board, which always rubbed off on my clothes. And Yushan washed her hands, untied her apron, and put it on me. I felt her arms go around my sides and I said, "I wish time would stop right here." "Because you feel that this moment is peaceful and tranquil?" "No, because at this moment you touched me. Very soft!" Exclamation point. And Yushan blushed and stood up quickly. I turned to look and she turned her back to me, making me look down on her face. At this time, Yushan's cell phone rang. It was Xingyi. She told Xingyi that she would be in for a while, but only 3 or 2 minutes after she hung up, and Xingyi came to her. He said, "Yeah, is there much noodles? Can Daddy come and eat with us?" And Yushan was ruthless and said, "No." And Xingyi walked in as if he didn't hear me. His fat body pushed me aside and he helped Yushan. I was silent. Let him be. But, so Zhang Shui and her daughter ate it themselves. Then, Yushan changed his position and came to my side. And Xingyi was very distressed. He said sullenly, "Beiren Charity Association, your aunt said that you should take Zhang Shui there to broaden your horizons. What do you think?" And Yushan said, "No problem. She just disliked her sister Zhang Shui, but she didn't dislike or hate her to the point of being disgusted or even angry with her. But I know that Xingyi is asking me." I met his gaze and said, "That's fine. It will be easier for you to see. Maybe Zhang Shui was not old enough to take the initiative to get involved in these things before, maybe there was no factor of my activities involved, or maybe because Xingyi did not pay attention to the communication between the two little girls, he might have really not noticed the bad intentions of Zhang Shui and her daughter before." And Yushan, And Xingyi, yeah. I smiled at Yushan and said, "It's almost done." And Yushan looked at the noodles carefully and said, "It's okay." She made the dough rise, and the 3 of us sat at the stone table in the green space in front of the window. I took out my phone and saw that there were many unread messages in the Beiren Charity Foundation group. At the moment, the big boss hasn't joined the group yet, and everyone is just chatting and saying whatever they want to say. But I found that I had somehow become the center of conversation. "Mr. Chen, do you think you are so powerful? Why don't you come now?" That's right, if you don't know, you would think he has monopolized the entire industry. In my industry, there are 2 other companies competing with me in City X, Cheese and Xiong's. We have always been in a competitive relationship, and people jokingly call it a 3-legged tripod. But it shouldn't be to the point where others are hostile towards me, right? I slid up and found out the truth. It was the bosses of the Xiong and Qi families who were causing trouble.